Good morning, everybody. I am Jane Robertson. I am starting the hearing because at the moment, although we have our 3 elected members here, they haven't determined yet who is going to chair the hearing. So I will just invite somebody to move. Who shall chair?
I'd like to move Councillor Cox to be chair.
I would second that most enthusiastically.
Right. So I will pass over the hearing to Councillor Cox.
Okay, thanks, Jane, and welcome everyone. Welcome to the media, public. And this is recorded in a public session, hearing of the submissions on the Mount Iron Reserve Management Plan. There are no apologies, we're all here. I've noted we've been recorded and there are going to be some submitters appearing via Zoom. First, I'd like to ask, any of the 3 of us got any conflicts of interest? No conflicts of interest. Confirmation of the agenda. It's a pretty straightforward agenda. I've moved that the agenda be confirmed without additional alteration. Barry seconded. In favour?
Aye.
Barry. Reporting officer summary. We've got the agenda here. We're having let's hear from the reporting officer first, and then we'll start hearing the submissions as per our schedule that we've got here. And welcome, Christine.
Hi, good morning. Welcome, everyone. The hearings report can be taken as read. We haven't received any late submissions since the report. We appreciate all the submissions that we've received. There's been very strong engagement throughout our whole process from the beginning. Mount Iron is clearly very valued by the community. There was strong overall support for ecological enhancement and pest control, and general support for the vision, objectives and community participation. Main areas of differing positions were around biking, the extent of commercial and community activities and access points. There weren't many submissions that were out of scope. There are a couple of operational matters that came through which we've passed on to operational teams, such as upgrading existing signage there. But yeah, we really appreciate the community's input on what will be the community's document for Mount Iron.
Okay, thank you. Chris, you got any questions? Not this stage?
Not at this point, I don't think so.
Barry? No, I haven't. I'd just like to thank the staff all the effort they've put into this. It's been a big job. Okay, well, once we've heard all the submissions, we may get things we would like, technical things we would like to check out, but we'll come back to you with that, and most of it will be covered in the deliberations tomorrow. Okay. Thank you. All right, thank you for that. So we're hearing the submissions. We're hearing submissions today, and at the end of that, we'll be adjourning, and then there's a time for deliberation. We'll be deliberating tomorrow morning, I think, starting at 9 o'clock. Okay, so the first submitter we've got coming up is Mark Buckingham. Welcome. Yeah, go up, Mark and Karen.
Yeah.
And even though it's a formal hearing, don't get too intimidated. It's we're all on the living in the same community. Okay.
First time for everything.
Yeah. So we've got your submissions, and we've read them, but now's your chance to. We're allowing up to 10 minutes, including question time. So just highlight and emphasise things you think we should really concentrate on. Thank you.
Hey, good morning. My name is Mark Buckingham, and I oppose the draft plan as written. A brief background about myself. I grew up in Dunedin and have holidayed in the area since the mid-80s. In my 20s, I worked for the Department of Conservation for 4 years in Queenstown, Makarora and Dunedin. In 1999, I purchased our property on the lower slopes of Little Mount Iron and moved to Wanaka in 2000. So our property borders the Mount Iron outstanding natural feature and has a large lot residential zoning. The zoning has restrictions such as minimum section size of 4,000 square metres, low density housing and protection of the native kānaka. All these restrictions are to help retain the values of the outstanding natural feature and the values of Mount Iron Recreation Reserve. So my first question to council is council going to allow, and now the council wants to allow a mountain bike park to be built on the reserve. So my first question is, will they be changing the zoning to allow us to subdivide. I mean, if there is a mountain bike above us, what is the purpose of retaining these restrictions? And as luck would have it, our shared driveway was part of the purchase of the Little Mount Iron farmland. My wife and another resident will be talking about the driveway, and I fully support their submissions. I'd like to make it clear I'm not against mountain biking. My wife and I have mountain bikes, and it is a great activity. It is the building of bike tracks on the reserve that is the issue here. The benefits of mountain biking are not in dispute. There are benefits in all recreational activities, and they all should be encouraged. It is location, location, location. Objectives in the draft plan. The proposed objective to allow a mountain bike park to be built on Mount Iron clashes directly with just about every one of the other objectives listed. I don't have time to go through all of them, but here are three. To preserve and prioritise the natural, open and informal recreation and scenic experience of the reserve. To protect and enhance the reserve's unique, special and significant ecological values, including SNAs. To protect the reserve from cumulative adverse effects of use and development. How can the council seriously carry out these objectives when they are proposing to allow a mountain bike park to be built on the reserve? And since mountain biking is the only activity listed as an objective, it has priority over all other activities. I'm supposed to do this earlier. I'll give. Supposed to hand these to you. I've handed the landscape document, the landscape values document as part of my submission that you may or may not have seen. The document lists values that many of us have and feel about Mount Iron. I will quickly mention some of the key words. On page 3, there's very high valued panoramic views, high level of naturalness, extent of regenerating indigenous vegetation, the largely unmodified nature of the landform, high aesthetic attributes, significant number of residents and visitors, regenerating indigenous vegetation, the high degree of contrast with surrounding urban areas, easy accessibility and high level of use by locals and visitors. And the summary of landscape values are also important. Very high physical values, very high associative values, high perceptual values. So the reserve is already highly valued and well used. 180,000 divided by 365 is 493 visitors each and every day. And we know over the next 3 months, it will be thousands each day. Council wanting to include more activities is treating it more like an urban park and succumbing to pressure from within council by a select few. Those people supporting this proposal seem to think the management plan process is some sort of popularity contest, of which the landform, flora and fauna have no voice. What will be the impact on the landscape? Like Wanaka are calling them existing trails, I consider them scars or wounds that have been healing for over 20 years. If Mount Iron was in any other location, like coastal Otago or Southland, you would not be able to find those tracks after 20 years. They would have been overgrown with grasses, then vegetation, and they would have disappeared. The fragile flora and fauna on Mount Iron has to survive in the harsh central Otago climate. Hot, dry summers, freezing cold winters, heavy rain events 5 to 6 times a year. How much vegetation will be removed in the construction of the access track and 15 to 20 bike tracks in the special natural area? And how much more vegetation will be removed for the proposed helipad? How wide will the trails be? This will expose what flora and fauna is left behind in the harsh central Otago climate. Expose it to the harsh central Otago climate. Heavy rain events will cause soil erosion runoff onto the little vegetation left behind and damage it. Will the bike tracks be closed in winter or after heavy rain events? Bike Wanaka close in winter and have had several tracks closed this spring due to high rainfall. Has there been a full study done on the existing flora and fauna? We are told there are threatened and endangered species up there. I fully support the Forest and Bird submission in relation to needing to undertake a study of the flora and fauna. What impact will this bike park have on future growth of present users? In 2050, there will be maybe 400,000 visitors. Planning now will make it a lot easier for future planners. Priority should be given to investigating tracks for people with restricted mobility. They are a portion of society who cannot experience Mount Iron at the moment. Go to an engineering department at a university or polytech and make it a project for them to try and figure out. There are plenty of community groups and educational opportunities for planting on the reserve without first destroying it. We were told quite proudly that Bike Wanaka will build and maintain the bike tracks at no cost to the council or ratepayer. Mr. Thiel has also offered to build and maintain his house at no cost to the council or ratepayer. We were told that Bike Wanaka will enhance and protect the reserve, but that's obviously after cutting down the native vegetation and carving 15 to 20 bike trails into the landscape of the special natural area. In my submission, I mentioned trying to find out more information about this proposal without success. The drop-in session was a complete waste of time. How can anyone make an informed submission to council about this proposal when the only information is that it is proposed? Sticky Forest is an exotic pine plantation on private land. It is still open to the public, so why propose another mountain bike park? What is the size of this activity user group? If users want more, they should do what everyone else has to do and go and pay for it. It's about the same cost as a tennis club membership. There is a vast array of mountain biking opportunities close to Wanaka and a shortage of walking only areas. Other locations can and will be found for mountain biking. There is only one Mount Iron. To conclude, the reserve is an outstanding natural feature with special natural areas. Building a mountain bike park will have significant adverse effects and is not appropriate for the reserve. It was banned over 20 years ago and not from lack of interest. The reserve should not be destroyed to cater for a small user group. The objective should be removed along with all policies relating to mountain biking. The council has for over 25 years protected the views down the lake, and yet in the very first management plan to destroy it. Please don't. Mount Iron is one of Wanaka's gems and should be treated that way. This council are the Kai Tiaki Tanga, guardians of the land. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, mate. That's your time up. Did you have any quick questions? No, I think that was a pretty thorough presentation. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Really good. And I don't have questions.
Let's all run really quick one. You keep talking about a mountain bike park. You take that out of the thing, so separate, not park, but separate trails or tracks for use by bikers. You're against that too, eh? Take away the vision of a Lismore Park bike track.
To separate off part of the reserve for exclusive use of mountain bikers is wrong.
Or bikers, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. That's good. Okay, Karen.
Good morning. I hate public speaking, so please bear with me. My name is Karen Buckingham. I live with my husband Mark at 693 Aubrey Road, otherwise incorrectly listed in the Mount Iron Management Plan as Mount Iron Heights. I oppose the draft plan as written. I'm opposed to the proposed use of this driveway for public access to Mount Iron Reserve. I strongly recommend, for resident and public safety reasons, that all advertising of this driveway, access point 9, Mount Iron Heights, as a public access point be removed from the Mount Iron Management Plan. Our driveway has never been called Mount Iron Heights. There is in the past a drive with that name 200 metres to the east, but that name has since been removed. Our shared driveway was inherited by the council when they purchased the land. Since that time, council stated in a letter that we are allowed to access our properties using that driveway, which we are very thankful for, considering we have easement rights. Is it a breach of the district plan to change the use from private to public without the consent of interested parties? Does our steep, narrow, winding driveway meet the definition of a public road? I think not. The increased danger of opening up our once private driveway is immense. All of the residents have made the council very aware of the danger to both themselves, pets, and the public if it becomes a designated access point. We aren't against mountain biking, but we are against our driveway being used as a downhill time trial race course at any time of the day or night. Our roughly 800 metres of driveway is steep, narrow, has blind corners, no footpaths, and is overgrown with carnuka in places. A significant amount of the driveway is too narrow for two vehicles to pass safely, requiring one or the other to back into a nearby driveway or water table to create sufficient passing space. As residents, we're very conscious of the inherent danger of meeting other traffic on the driveway. There are 10 residential properties, of which at least 5 offer visitor accommodation, which only exacerbates the need for vigilance. In addition, the driveway is frequently used by service, trade, and heavy vehicles, such as those delivering linen, gas bottles, heating fuel, and food. To date, there have been several near misses with our neighbours and their visitors, either walking, driving, or biking. Most of us have to back out of our driveways, and despite very low speeds and careful checking, the speed that mountain bikes have already been clocked at doesn't allow for a great outcome should we accidentally collide. Back in 2005, a visitor's car actually drove off the driveway above our house and flew down our bank, face planting into the blockwork of our unfinished house. And that didn't even involve any other vehicle or bike. He managed to do it all on his own. If that can happen in the good old days of virtually no traffic, what is the potential for more aerial visitations, be they more vehicles, bikes, pedestrians, or pets? None of us want to be responsible for causing injury or death to either a casual visitor or a speeding mountain biker who may not be aware of the inherent dangers of simply using our driveway. I think it's incredibly irresponsible of the council to put any public at known risk on such an unsafe access way. Locals will quickly realise it's dangerous, but new visitors to the area will see it advertised as an access point and not be aware of the risk to themselves or others. Bike Wanaka, in a recent Facebook post, was encouraging its members to make a submission on the draft plan. They even had a pre-formatted form to submit stating they specifically wanted our driveway as an access point. Why would a bike club specifically want an 800 metre steep, winding, sealed driveway for anything other than racing down it? Certainly not for the uphill slog. Our preference is for signage at the driveway access off Aubrey Road, stating driveway for residents and their visitors only. Public access to Mount Iron walking tracks is via Hidden Hills, weather or close. No public access to Mount Iron via this driveway. If this access was, however, to go ahead, and a resident was to cause injury or a fatality to anyone, especially to a downhill racer, then it should be on every member of the council's head and conscience that you all played a part in allowing this to happen. We have brought the probability of numerous tragedies waiting to happen to your attention, so now it's in your hands. There is talk of widening our driveway and adding a walkway. Seriously? Have you actually been up our driveway to see how much of a ridiculous idea that actually is? To modify the driveway for public use would be a great example of the council wasting ratepayers' money, the majority of ratepayers who will never even access a driveway at all. And do you realise underneath that tar seal is a spiderweb of pipes, cables and wires that would all have to be relocated if such an absurd idea was approved? This ninth access point is completely unnecessary when a safe and well-formed access is already available via Hidden Hills, number 4 on the map. Public do not need 2 access points within 200 metres of each other. There is also no provision for parking nearby on Aubrey Road or at the bottom of our driveway. No doubt many walkers will not actually walk all the way from town or from their accommodation. They will want to drive. and park somewhere close. And those who can't read signs will no doubt attempt to drive up to hunt for non-existent parking. They may see a resident vehicle drive up, so they follow it, only to find a dead end and no parking. Wildfire is a huge concern to all of us who live on Mount Iron. More visitors to the Mount Iron Reserve significantly increases the chance of wildfire, especially in peak summer tourist times. We believe that controlling the fire danger and public access via the existing access points into the Mount Iron Reserve is sufficient QLDC responsibility without taking on more. For visitors to the Mount Iron Reserve, the existing access points also offer far safer entry and exit passage than our driveway does. There's also been talk by a councillor of wanting to increase the number of access points on the reserve to make it more accessible. There are already 10 access points listed. There should only be 9 for reasons already mentioned about our driveway. What is the benefit of more access points? Why carve up more tracks up Mount Iron? Is 9 access points to Mount Iron not enough? There is almost more access points than there are boat ramps on Lake Wanaka. And look at the size of Lake Wanaka. If you can't find and get to one of these 9 access points, then you should probably just go and visit the Wanaka tree instead. Once again, these council ideas are eroding the values of the reserve. In the event of a wildfire, we've already been advised by friends that it would be highly unlikely that a fire appliance would risk using our driveway for fear of being trapped. In most circumstances, helicopter use would be the most likely. At the drop-in session, we were told that Bike Wanaka will build and maintain the trails at no extra cost to the ratepayer. And when asked who will monitor the track building and any after-hours modifications, we were told that no resources were allocated for that, and it will be left up to Bike Wanaka themselves to self-monitor and up to public goodwill to report any issues. The Facebook post stated, "I'm shovel ready and can't wait for the night digs." I think that sums up how reliable, effective and trustworthy self-monitoring is going to be. That was a post from one of the very people you'd be allowing to self-monitor. But don't worry, there'll be no charge to the ratepayer. To sum up, I do not support the use of access point 9 Mount Iron Heights to access the Mount Iron Reserve. Hopefully logic and common sense will prevail, and that will in turn save injuries, unnecessary deaths that would otherwise be on your shoulders. I fully support my husband's submission and any other submission opposing the building of a mountain bike park or bike tracks on Mount Iron. It is a significant natural feature with special natural areas and is valued just as it is. I specifically support the objective 5.13 to protect the reserve from cumulative and adverse effects of use and development. A mountain bike park would not support this objective. To conclude, I fully support the forest and bird submission and that a full study should be undertaken to see exactly what values the reserve has and what native flora and fauna there is, so that endangered and threatened species can be protected for future generations to come.
Thanks, Karen. You got any petitions? No. Just really quick, I've been up there, up your driveway, and seen in great detail. Are you also opposed if there was ability to restrict us to walking or pedestrian traffic movement only? Would you still be against that?
I would, but yeah, okay. For fire risk, for
okay,
yeah, just it's not something, and cars coming down.
Yeah,
it's
and just totally aside from this hearing, but a quick question on freedom camping. There was a camper van parked up there near the top. Do you have much of that?
That's a residence.
It's a
Okay,
residence.
right, thank you. Okay, thanks for your time.
Do we know where the Mount Iron Heights name comes from?
200 metres along the road
No,
towards Albert Town, there was a driveway with a low rock wall, and it had Mount Iron Heights in the metal sign, but it was taken down 4 or 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Okay,
But
thank you.
at the
I don't know how.
drop-in session, no one could answer that question. Why?
So, don't know how it got on the plan. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good solution. Hey, Ian, welcome. We've heard all that, Ian.
Yeah.
We've got your written submission. There's your chance to clarify anything that you've been heard or been reported.
Thank you. My submission this morning will be slightly different to that, as you may expect. So, good morning. My name is Ian Greaves, and I'm here this morning speaking on behalf of Bike Wanaka. I have been on the committee of Bike Wanaka coming up 9 years. In my professional role outside of Bike Wanaka, I'm also involved in the resource management space. It is important to highlight that I'm here speaking on behalf of our 1,000 plus members and the 81 submitters who have specifically requested that Bike Wanaka speak on their behalf. Subject to some minor changes outlined in the Bike Wanaka submission, Bike Wanaka supports the Mount Iron Reserve Management Plan. Of the 446 submissions QLDC received, 379 are in support. This indicates that QLDC have delivered a reserve management plan that achieves the outcomes that are fundamentally supported by the community. I think this is a testament to the significant consultation process that QLDC have undertaken in the past 12 to 18 months. What can be seen from the submissions on the reserve management plan and the earlier consultation by QLDC to help shape it is that there is overwhelming support in the community to reinvigorate biking on Mount Iron, noting that mountain biking has occurred on Mount Iron for many decades, although less in recent years due to restrictions from the landowner. The importance of the Mount Iron Reserve for biking has significantly increased recently with the recent Sticky Forest Environment Court decision that has paved the way for residential development of Sticky Forest and ultimately the loss of a world-class mountain bike trail network that sits within it. Mount Iron will play an important role in continuing to provide an accessible mountain bike trail network in urban Wanaka, plus helping retain Wanaka as a destination, a mountain biking destination for visitors. This morning, you've already heard from submitters who are opposed to biking in this reserve on the grounds of the area's ecological values. It is my message to you that biking and ecological protection in this reserve do not need to be mutually exclusive. We as a club are acutely aware of this area's significant ecological values, and the last thing we as a club would like to see is those ecological values damaged. In fact, our goal with Mount Iron is not only to re-establish biking, but also be at the forefront of the ecological protection enhancement with our significant membership base. We recognise that this will mean trails will need to be carefully designed to avoid sensitive areas and ensuring bikers stick to established networks. And this will also include keeping bikers separated from walkers, which we support. There are many ways this can be achieved through good design, construction, maintenance, signage, planting, and physical barriers. Ecological protection and mountain biking have successfully been achieved together in other areas. I encourage you to look up the Makara Peak Mountain Bike Park in Wellington. Trails in this bike park weave through 250 hectares of native bush. Since this park opened in 1998, the trust that manages the park have worked in partnership with Wellington City Council to build over 40 kilometres of trails, planted 10,000 of native plants, established a comprehensive trapping network to eradicate pest species and to encourage the return of native bird life. There is no reason we cannot achieve this with Mount Iron. Under the Reserves Act, Section 17 states that the purpose of a recreation reserve, which is what Mount Iron is, and I quote, is providing areas for recreation and sporting activities and the physical welfare and enjoyment of the public, and for the protection of the natural environment and beauty of the countryside, with the emphasis on the retention of open spaces and on outdoor recreational activities, including recreational tracks in the countryside, end quote. I think this is important as the Act clearly places an emphasis on providing for recreational activities, including recreational tracks, with the protection of the natural environment to be properly provided for, but not at the expense of recreation. Overall, Bike Wanaka supports the proposed Mount Iron Reserve Management Plan. We encourage you to listen to the overwhelming community support for biking to be provided in this reserve. I'll just quickly clarify a couple of things that you've already heard this morning. Firstly, There was mention of a helipad. I've never heard of that before in terms of any plans that we've had for the bike park. Sorry, and the word bike park, I think that you mentioned that, Commissioner Cox. I think that's an over exaggeration. That the intention was what we would like to see as the re-establishment of trails. There's no plans for it to be a bike park. There's no plans for it to be an exclusively used areas at the expense of any other user on the reserve. And as I said in my written submission here this morning, in terms of the ecological work, we as a club have already engaged an ecologist to assist with some of the work that will be needed. And I think it's worth highlighting as well that there will be a resource management process that will need to occur for any activities up there. So there is going to be significant further work in terms of effects. And I think what this reserve management plan does is just establishing a high level document which specifies what the objectives, what the policies are. The nitty gritty is the detail is still to come. And so I don't think we need to get lost in concerns. Those elements will be managed and investigated as we go further. So thank you for the time this morning and happy to answer any questions.
There's a quick, oh, sorry. Do you have an idea of the numbers of bike Wanaka members that go through ski forest?
Oh, that's a good question. We do actually have a bike count number up there. I don't have it on the top of my head, but I'm very happy to get those exact numbers and send them through. I can do that through Christine or Kat if you'd like. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, just
you'll be
thinking of what level of increase you might see if we re-establish the existing trails and then sticking forest disappears, are we going to get dozens or hundreds?
Yeah, I think in peak times it will be hundreds for sure. Yeah, it will be. But look, I'll get those numbers for you, and I'll send them through.
You see bike trails as being exclusively for biking or shared space?
The separation of walkers and bikers will be important in terms of a safety perspective. There will be potentially opportunities for shared use on some of the up tracks where there's no potential safety, but for sure, I think on downhill tracks from a safety perspective, it will need to be, bikers and walkers will need to be separated.
No, I think that's good. So thanks very much, Ian. Yeah, if you could send through that information. I would notice some of the things in your submission about some of the words. We'll be looking through that, checking what wording we've got, and your suggestion on definitions. I think that was about all. The helipad, I think, came from another submission. There was mention of a helipad on top for medical type purposes. I think that's. And it was mentioned in the plan, enable helicopters for medical purposes only.
But that my submission on that should apply to anybody that's using Mount Isa for walker has an accident, a heart attack. Then of course.
Oh yeah, it's not to do with not to do with.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about one activity. I'm talking about where the helipad thing possibly came from. The other thing was a lot of comment about policy 5.12 about we've got specifying the biking, but there's other recreational uses that didn't get specified, in there. So then we've got, so for consistency, do we really need to have 5.12?
My response to that is probably twofold. Is I think that represents the overwhelming community support and the number of submissions that are seeking a trail network, a biking trail network. So that's a fair reflection of what the community is asking for. And then secondly, from our perspective, there's no reason not to list rock climbing, paragliding, walking in those objectives. We absolutely welcome all recreational activities on this reserve. So it's not a reflection of the bike club stating that this should be more important than other activities. Definitely not. We're all inclusive and welcome all those activities.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you for your time.
Right, now that's Mr. Jim Keswick.
My name's
Oh,
Evan.
sorry, different.
Yes, apparently, he has apologised.
Oh, okay, you just sent me through a,
And this is Edwin.
Edwin Shepherd. Yeah, hi, I'm a member of the Wanaka Climbing Club, also the general manager of the Aotearoa Climbing Access Trust, and a former lawyer working in the resource management space.
okay, just hang on, let me get there. Morning. So you're representing Wanaka Climbing Club, and your name's Edwin. Okay, over to you. We've had the submission, we've had them, and just for information, we did, some of the community board was invited to have a look out at the hills, some of the climbing creeks, so we have actually, we were all there, the three of us were there, so we have seen a bit of what's going on out there, so over to you.
Yes, no, I attended as well. That was a great opportunity to meet council members. Yeah, so look, I'm going to keep it pretty simple because from our perspective, the issue of or non-issue of climbing in the reserve is pretty straightforward. There's very few safety or other issues around rock climbing in the reserve, just a couple of key points that we want to cover off. But just for background, some of which you probably will have already picked up from that site visit, but climbing's been practiced at Mount Iron for several decades. There's over 70 different climbing routes established on at least 8 different crags. A couple of those are in their infancy, so they're probably not marked on the council maps, but there's at least 5 different climbing areas that are in the established guidebook that was released a couple of years ago. As it's noted in the submission, it's likely that there's been in the order of around 100,000 ascents of climbing routes in the reserve, and there's it's enjoyed by hundreds of climbers every month. So it's hard to say, but climbers are probably the second largest user group of the reserve after walkers. It's also one point to emphasize maybe is that it is in fact quite a unique area. One of the things that non-climbers often don't understand about climbing is that there's extremely limited opportunities for rock climbing on good quality cliffs around the country, and a high quality area like Mount Iron is unique and irreplaceable. So what it offers the climbing community in Wanaka is firstly proximity. The nearest alternative is out of hospital flat. And what you get at Mount Iron is this incredible opportunity to go climbing after work in the evening on those long summer evenings. It's shady because it's east facing in the evening, so it's just a beautiful opportunity that many people take advantage of. And it's quite a different style to the other climbing around the Wanaka area. It's steeper and more overhanging. So that's also a big draw card for climbers. In terms of the plan, the first point I just wanted to make was we support the policies around community partnering, guardianship and volunteering. The Wanaka Climbing Club has a long history of helping to manage recreation and environmental outcomes in not only Mount Iron but other crags in the district, including those out at Hospital Flat. So Climbing Club members are involved in pest trapping, native restoration and replanting work, and they also help to manage the climbing areas themselves. So we've installed infrastructure such as gravel platforms in some area with, in consultation and liaison with DOC and council where required in order to prevent erosion. And the club also maintains the fixtures on those walls, so club members will go out there and address any safety issues that come to our attention. And there's an exemplary history of safety at the crags. This is a point that can't be emphasised enough. People often associate rock climbing with risk or danger, but in reality it is an incredibly safe sport. And in the several decade-long history of climbing around Mount Iron, there has never been an issue of a bolt or other fixture failing or any related accident. We do have a few suggestions. We generally support the management plan. We do have a few suggestions for changes that could be made just to ensure that climbing, which is a really positive community activity, is not unduly restricted. So one is suggesting a new objective to foster rock climbing on existing and potential new crags within the reserve. So the point there is just to make it explicit that climbing is encouraged, and both in the existing crags and potential new crags, because development of those areas is ongoing. And when I say development, I just want to emphasize that that's also a very low impact activity. So we're not talking about the installation of new buildings or other structures. It literally is just somebody putting a fixture in the rock to make climbing safe. We suggested a small change to policy 6.7.16 to support the use and extension of existing and future climbing crags instead of just the climbing crags, just reinforcing that point. And we request a change to policy 6.7.3 or a new separate policy clause stating ensure walking tracks are separated from climbing crag base areas. So you probably got that download at the walk around already, but really the only safety issue of any concern would be if a track were to go around the base of a climbing crag. And we can manage that in two different ways through comms with the council. Firstly, by when climbing club members want to install a new route, they'll consult with the club in advance to make sure that the cliff where they're installing it isn't above proposed or intended walking tracks. And conversely, we request that the council notify us if they're of the tracks that they're planning to install so that we can check that's not going to be an issue. And that's it basically.
Well, that's good, thanks.
Very straightforward.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
No problem at all.
Okay. Tom Anderson.
Hi there, Tom Anderson here on behalf of Spark and Connexa. Thank you for allowing us to appear online. Just checking you can hear us okay?
Still good. Thanks, Tom.
Excellent, thank you. So the submission that I put in, I'm a planner and do a lot of work with the telecommunications industry. And the key motivation for Spark and Connexa to submit on the management plan was really to seek consistency between what the management plan and the district plan, or the proposed district plan, are seeking in terms of Mount Iron. So just speaking to the proposed district plan to provide some context, that in my view sets up a very robust framework for any resource consent application, given that Mount Iron is an outstanding natural feature. And there's a landscape assessment in the district plan which considers that there is an extremely limited capacity for infrastructure within on Mount Iron, but nonetheless there does remain an ability for a proposal to be considered and go through a process. So with this in mind, obviously seeking the outcome for the Mount Iron management plan to be consistent with the proposed district plan in terms of that consideration for infrastructure, and the amendments that we suggested in the submission, in my view, address that consistency. From an operational perspective, with Mount Iron being in an elevated position with a fast-growing urban area surrounding it, it is strategically a good location for telecommunications infrastructure. But notwithstanding this, it is an important and a special landscape, and so as such, it shouldn't be a fait accompli for infrastructure to be located on it. There should be an onus on any applicant to say why they have to be in that location, what's their functional and operational reason, and that is achieved through the RMA process, which I think that the reserve management process should support. turning to some of the benefits of having telecommunications infrastructure on Mount Iron. It's not just to the surrounding community in terms of their connectivity, but also emergencies. And as stated in the submission, fire sensors attached to infrastructure is something Spark in particular, I understand, have been working on with Queenstown Lake District Council's emergency response team. And I might pass over to Graham McCarrison from Spark quickly, who's with me, just to talk briefly to that point.
Yeah. Good morning. So I'm Graham McCarrison. I'm the Planning and Engagement Manager for Spark, and so work closely with Fiona Matthews, who's also online at Connexa. So a number of you will be aware that in Queenstown, with the Wilding Pine issue, that Spark with the council and FENS established a fire monitoring device. It's a remote device aimed at giving early warning to any potential risk of fire, so that services can be deployed before you get major events, particularly given how close some of these areas are to urban areas. So that remains an important function, and Mount Iron's clearly one of those spaces that ideally you would deploy such a facility. So that's all I have.
So that brings us to the end of our presentation and our reasoning as to why we put the submission in. So happy to answer any questions. I'll just note we've also got Fiona from Connexa online. Fiona's at home sick at the moment, which is why you can't see her, but obviously interested. And just to give you some context around who Connexa are and who Spark are, Connexa build the infrastructure which Spark locate their network on. So there's kind of a symbiotic relationship between the two companies.
Okay. Well, that's really good. Yeah, we've got the submission is the good information detail on there. We appreciate what you've just told us. And we understand we've had a lot of involvement, obviously, with the fire activities and monitoring systems.
Yeah,
and
sure.
It comes up again later on talking about fire mitigation. Do you have any questions, Chris?
No, that's so.
Okay, so just take it on from your submission. There's words like tying up the infrastructure side of it through the RMA process. You're not happy with words like discourage and a few things like that. So we've taken all that on board. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, much appreciated. Thank you. All right.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Oh, way ahead of time.
Okay, they definitely did not need
15 minutes.
2 lots of 10 minutes.
What do we want to? Who have we got? Anne? Guy? Who? We want to jump. There's a problem with doing that or not?
To go ahead with.
Down the list a bit. Jump down the list of those that are.
Oh, sure. I mean, make use of everybody's time.
Okay. Guy, you happy to come forward now?
I had to
Oh.
cancel today. My name's Jill Gardner. I had to cancel because I didn't think I could be here. I actually now am here. I note that I therefore was taken out of the speaker slot. If it was possible, I would like to go back into the speaker slot, but I understand that I did email yesterday thinking I couldn't come. So over to you, whether it's possible or not.
I had removed her and put Amanda McComb in her space, but we are now ahead and Jill is here, so it's almost like a, well.
Okay, Jill, can we have Jill first?
Okay.
Okay, pop up here now, Jill.
Really?
Yep, let's get into it. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, are you Jane?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, well, it's just worked out really well.
Yeah, I popped along just in case it was possible.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, Jill.
so my submission is basically that there are plenty of biking, I oppose the biking network going ahead in this plan. There are plenty of biking trails elsewhere in Wanaka, and Mount Iron should continue to be preserved for walkers only. Mount Iron should be kept as walking trails only and not for bikers. If the plan does succeed to put in bike trails, in my opinion, there should be only one bike trail, not a network, one bike trail going up and one only coming down, and it should definitely be one way. There should not be any more bike trails on Mount Iron than walking trails, as Wanaka is already well served by bike trails, apart from the sticky forest potential demise. Mount Iron is unique and should be preserved for its beauty and serenity enjoyed by walkers only. It is doubtful that bikers have time to absorb the beauty and serenity given the speed that they bike at. Bikers have access to virtually every other trail around Wanaka, and these shared tracks are a major issue for safety for walkers. Significant issues already on shared tracks exist due to bikers' speed and disregard for walkers. And I suspect that a lot of this is not being reported at the moment, but there is definitely an issue out there. Mobility user tracks would require natural pathways on Mount Iron to undergo major change, and therefore it's debatable whether it's necessary given where else mobility users can go in Wanaka. It's very steep, and so significant cost would be incurred to put in mobility tracks. But I believe few mobility users would use it due to the steep incline. There are places in town where walkers should have access only, and Mount Iron should remain as one of those. Similarly, for example, Glendhu Bike Park is for bikers only. I am a keen mountain biker, but feel very strongly about denying access to bikers on Mount Iron, except for a track around the base of the mountain. There are apparently 380 odd people who support a bike trail out of the total submissions. I don't believe this is an accurate representation of those who actually oppose a bike network. I don't believe there is overwhelming support for a bike trail / park / network. I think that the bike trail network will be the ruination of Mount Iron, and I believe it will involve significant extra cost on ratepayers in the future if the council proceeds with allowing a bike trail network. End of story.
Okay, pretty clear message there. You talk about the issue with shared tracks in other areas, but if there's tracks or trails up there were separate, you wouldn't have that conflict. You said you'd support one track up and down or something.
Yeah, I think that.
If they have other trails and tracks separate from walkers, you wouldn't have that conflict. Okay?
No, I believe that any bike trail should be separate, given what's happening around Wanaka. I mean, I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but there is a significant issue on these tracks right now around Wanaka with shared tracks. It's existing from, for example, the rowing club to Waterfall Creek. It's existing from town down to Penrith. Yeah. But the bike trail network itself, I don't believe there should be a network of bike trails on Mount Iron if there's not the same amount of network of walking trails. And it comes back to the serenity and beauty that Mount Iron has and should always be. And I think that the bike tracks, they're going to ruin it. And it's going to give priority to bikers and not walkers. So one trail up, a one-way track for a bike trail up and down, and that's what walkers have at the moment. I don't see that we need multiple trails for bikers on Mount Iron.
Chris, you have any?
I don't think so. I think that's actually quite clear.
That's very clear. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing me.
That's right. Well, break. You might talk for 5 minutes. Ready? No. Okay, Guy, you want to come talk, please? Barry, I reckon you wanted to speak for too long.
I only told him that just to, if he knew how long I was going to talk, he wouldn't have turned up. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to have a say on the plan. My name's Guy Stephen. I've lived in Wanaka for 23 and a half years. Before I moved here, I lived in Christchurch. I was a sort of competitive athlete. I ran for a club. I did a lot of off-road running, and I continued that when I moved to Wanaka, and Mount Iron was one of the places where I would go regularly. When it was announced that Mount Iron was going to be purchased and turned into a reserve, and that there would be an opportunity to go through a process like we're going through now, I got to thinking about how many times I'd been up there. And I hadn't, some of them I'd recorded in a diary, but I thought the easiest thing was to work out just, okay, as of today, it's been 1,225 weeks. There are times when I went up Mount Iron daily. I remember when my wife went to Canada, I went up there every day that she was away for a month, and I continued that to the point where I'd been up there 100 times in 102 days. Sometimes I'd go up 3 times a day, either 6 just continuously or at 3 different occasions. And I worked out that probably over the 1,225 weeks, on average, maybe twice a week, 1,500 to 2,000 times I've been over Mount Iron. When you've been over it that many times as a walker, the existing trail gets a little bit boring. You don't want to just be doing that one trail up and down the front or down the back at the same time that many times. So I welcome the opportunity to see and be able to use more of Mount Iron, not just the existing walking trail that pretty much all the other users use. With respect to the plan, my principal objection to it is clause 5.12, which is the establishment of mountain bike tracks. The objectives section of the plan govern how the plan is interpreted and applied. As the introduction to section 5 says, they are the overarching goals. They are the succinct statements as to the purpose of the resource management plan, of the reserve management plan. And in my submission, establishing mountain bike trails should not be one of those overarching goals for this plan. No other individual activity enjoys the privileged status that mountain biking would enjoy if the plan was left in its current wording. In my opinion, all users should be treated equally and should be allowed. It should be allowed on Mount Iron to the extent that that is compatible with the other objectives and policies in the plan. Clause 5.12 is inconsistent with clause 5.5, which is to protect and enhance the reserve's unique, special and significant ecological values, including the SNAs, and that's especially, in my opinion, with respect to the upper part of Mount Iron, of Big Mount Iron. In my opinion, the objective in clause 5.11, which is to enable active and passive recreational use, access and enjoyment of the reserve, adequately allows for mountain biking where it is appropriate. In my submission, clause 5.12 could be deleted without the need to make any other adjustment to the plan. It should just simply be struck out. I note that there have been a lot of other submitters who support clause 5.12, I've been through the submissions and I haven't found any that explain why it should be there. And I note, Mr. Chairman, that you asked Ian Greaves why it should be there. He said that overwhelmingly the community supported it. I would suggest that he missed out 2 words. I suggest he should have said overwhelmingly the mountain biking community supported. And I don't believe that just because mountain bikers support it being there, I mean, why wouldn't they? That's not reason to have it in the reserve management plan. Okay. In terms of other comments on the plan, I would like to see policy clause 6.7.1 changed. Now that currently reads, the policy is to maintain and upgrade the current walking trail network for the continued use and enjoyment of the reserve by the community and visitors as a natural walking trail. Now, I believe it should be maintain, upgrade and extend current walking trails. Which sort of brings me to my overall feeling of the plan, which I get the feeling that the plan as drafted is slanted towards mountain biking to the detriment or to the exclusion of walkers. 180,000 walkers go up Mount Iron annually, and as I read the plan at the moment, there's not much in it for them in terms of the additional land that's being acquired. If you refer to the submission of the Upper Clutha Tracks Trust, they have suggested 1 additional walking trail on the northern aspect of Big Mount Iron. Now, this is a track that I walk all the time, apart from the section that goes down a very steep fence line, which I would oppose, but I mean, that's a management issue rather than the plan. That's about 500 metres long, 3 metres wide. That's 1,500 square metres that the walkers get. The mountain bikers will get 23 hectares of playground. And I would oppose that as the plan is currently worded. That part of the northern face of Mount Iron is, I call it the interior. It's a wonderfully quiet place to go. You leave the main track and suddenly you're pretty much on your own. It's quiet. If mountain bikers are allowed in there, it will be noisy. You will hear the clanging of the bike chains. You will hear bumping of the bikes as they land from the jumps. You will hear the exclamations from the riders. You only have to go up to Sticky Forest and listen, and it's not a quiet place. Mount Iron at the moment is a very quiet place when you get into that area. There are extensive trails already there. The mountain bikers want them reinstated as mountain bike trails. They're absolutely magic walking trails. You're walking amongst the Kānaka. You're walking just narrow tracks. You don't encounter anyone. It is a peaceful, quiet area where you can go just to enjoy the atmosphere. And in my view, allowing mountain bike trails in there would destroy that very special aspect of Mount Iron.
Okay. Have you got any more?
No,
That was really good.
Short and sweet.
Yep, very appreciate that. I've got a lot of points, made some notes there. You got anything, Barry?
Yeah, that's good.
Points there, thank you.
You'd rather remove 5.12 or would you?
I would like 5.12 removed completely. 5.11 would still allow for mountain bike tracks if that was appropriate. What I actually would like to comment on is the policy 6.7.3, which, and it's an issue that has been raised about biking and walking trails being kept separate. And you've asked this question a number of times as to whether people would oppose separate trails. It's a practical thing. At the moment, the only way you could have them separate is to keep mounted walkers to the perimeter of that area and allow mountain bikers to use the interior. You can't have them crossing over. As soon as you have them crossing over using those tracks, you've got potential conflict. To get to the scenic reserve section on the eastern side in that upper area, you have to walk through that area, and you would immediately have conflict with going across when you've got mountain bikers going at right angles to you coming down. And I do question to what extent it has really been studied as to whether mountain biking is an appropriate use up in that environment. It's in the valleys that go up in that area. One of them is very wet at times. Mountain biking going through there would cause a lot of ecological damage to it. And you only have to go up there now and see where the trails, the old mountain bike trails come down. You can see the damage that has been caused. You can see where the scars are as they come down. You can't see that without going up and walking on the existing tracks further up. But you can definitely see where the mountain bike tracks come down. And as soon as you allow mountain biking as a regular use up there, in my opinion, it's just going to trash the place.
Okay. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We're going to take a 5-minute break. 10 minutes. Oh, sorry.
No, he's due to come in after at 11:15.
11:15, right, yeah.
Yeah. So, tea, coffee here, there are some little questions.
No.
So, I'm sitting.
Again, you good? Yep.
Welcome, man. You all right?
Yes, thank you.
I can hear you. All yours. We've got your submission, but you emphasise what you want to make us understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The Upper Clutha Wilding Tree Group, realised, was formed a couple of years ago, and that we currently have council permission to remove wilding pine species from Mount Iron, and I'm pleased to report that that is almost completed. The Upper Clutha Wilding Tree Group is not just about wilding pines, though. We are concerned about all wilding species, which are predominantly on Mount Iron of the garden escapes. And Mount Iron has rapidly been covered in many sort of non-coniferous species like sort of cherries, hawthorn, rowan, just to name a wee few. And much of that infestation is within the current scenic reserve and along the west face, back towards the car park, and also along the east face, the Albertown side in particular. We're keen to see these species removed to allow the natural native regeneration process to continue. And that's going to be a multi-generational sort of natural regeneration, I think. The group is keen to be involved with helping with the removal of these species and can coordinate the work. It's not a quick fix, and it will take years to achieve. The area is very rough and difficult terrain to traverse, and will no doubt require many different control techniques to achieve. And we believe the removal of the wilding tree species is integral to the management plan for Mount Iron. We would also support any an appropriate revegetation program around the Mount Iron, in particular that on the lower west slopes that could be integrated into within the removal of wilding species. That's would be done by others, not by us, but the likes of Takakano. So we would actively support that sort of thing. So that's basically it in a nutshell. We are very keen to see the wildings removed, and if it's work is not done on that, it will actually cover most, if not all, of Mount Iron. It won't, particularly on the Albert Town and the west faces, and it's getting right up into the top, just under the top of Mount Iron on those steep faces. So that's all I have to say at the moment.
That's good, thanks, Alan. Any questions, Barry? No? The only question I've got is, comes up, I'm not sure, there are a couple of wilding pines in front of the dog trial memorial. Understand why they're still there.
They're special council trees. We're told that they are down for removal by council very shortly, and we didn't have to worry about those. It's possibly, there's also trees beside the wool shed that will be thought about in time too, but council operations has sort of got those in hand.
Right. The staff here, so thank you. Thanks, Alan. Right,
Okay.
thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Good.
Has there been lots of here? Yeah. Well, come up, Pete, can you happy to come forward now? Yeah, sure. We'll jump you ahead of in. 37. Oh, yeah, welcome. You got like 10 minutes. See how you go.
There we go. Thanks, guys. Firstly, introduce myself, Pete Jameson. Pete Jameson Trust, resident of 695A Albury Road. Deemed as apparently Mount Iron Heights, and the proposed access way of access 9 on the proposal. It's said to be a shared driveway. There's no actual legal entity being given to that access way as yet, as my understanding. So that needs to be covered, but all residents have a legal standing over that driveway through access and so forth. The rule book is the rule book as I see it. There's one rule book, it's called the district plan, and we all have to comply to it. Whilst I see many a time the rule book gets bent in favour of some parties, the rule book is the rule book and we all have to comply to it. If this was a private entity applying for the access or through the cycle trails, walkways, you would be deemed to have to comply to the rule book, and that would be designed around the planners, the roading engineers and so forth from the QLDC. I deem the QLDC as the bigger picture, not just the residents of Wanaka. We all have to pay when mistakes are made, and we've seen plenty of those over recent times. So one set of rules for all. It was asked in a residents' meeting about the applicable budget for this process of obtaining access way up through gate 9, we'll call it, or the hidden Mount Iron Heights driveway. Apparently there's no budget even been put to this, which surprises me immensely on a project this big, attaining to so many different facilities for the Mount Iron Reserve. That shocked me for a start, so that concerns me. It's nice to have the niceties, we all like niceties, but they all come at a cost. And someone has to be responsible. At the end of the day, a decision will be made. At that decision point in time, that decision process, the people, the parties, the applicable person is responsible from that day forward. That's how the law of the land sits. Compliance is important under its current state. Now, can I ask, have any of the panel been actually up the said road entranceway?
Yeah, I was up there on weekend.
And your thoughts?
I've got lots of thoughts. Yeah. I know, I sure took photos and I understand what you're saying. The road is narrow.
And I think collectively as residents up there, and it was raised at the residents' meeting with the QLDC, that we all have concerns over safety issues. It is totally non-compliant as it stands right here, right now. That road is not compliant. I have not seen reports from roading engineers, planners, And it was stated on the day about getting the legalities around it from QLDC, and that we haven't received any of that either. So I feel like we're in a bit of a smokescreen situation. We want the niceties of life, but we're not getting the full information flow back through to us as being, I suppose, a card holder in the QLDC. I'm a ratepayer. And all parties within the QLDC and the panel act in the best interests of those parties that contribute to the QLDC, not just those in Wanaka, but those in the whole party. So compliance is an issue. If it's the proposed walkway, my understanding, and it might vary from that of a planner, is that there has to be set distances from that of a motor vehicle to that of a walking track, or a walkway, we'll call it. As the road or the access way stands right now, it's totally non-compliant for vehicles, let alone putting an extra walkway and more pressure on the legalities behind the QLDC. It's totally non-compliant. To suggest mountain bikes, what a ridiculous statement as an access way. I've seen bikes come off the hill, come down through that road at a ridiculous speed, probably faster than you drove your car down, significantly faster. That is just lending itself to an accident. It's not a case of if, it's a case of when. And if it's a case of when, a decision has been made, and at that point, someone has to be responsible. Like I said, I think the proposals come from Parks and Reserves, fully support them, fully understand the energy that they put in and what their requirements are. But there's a lot more to this process of the whole Mount Iron picture than just Parks and Reserves. It's got to go into engineers, it's got to go into planning and the legalities that sit behind it, without a doubt. As I've said, the ownership comes at the point of decision making. The decision is made in the best interest of all parties in the QLDC, then the decision has been made. We can't change that, but it moves the legalities of who made the decision onto that particular party. Hence, most parties through this process on QLDC. So it moves total ownership on anything onto the QLDC. Very important. It's a public forum now. It's out in the open. We're all talking. It's all being recorded. So what's being said is what's being said. So it is a recorded document or process. And the process starts now. It has started in its interim, in its infancy, some months ago through planning, through Parks and Reserves and through community contact, but this is the real nuts and bolts of it. This is where the decisions are starting to get made, coming down to who is going to be responsible for the actions that happen. That's the important part. I look at the availability of other access points onto Mount Iron. There are 3 under my current understanding, and I might be wrong. They're looking for a 4th, that's fine. There is no parking facility for Gate 9, Mount Iron Heights. I just heard the number of 180,000 walkers go up Mount Iron. We're going to divide that into 4, just to give us a rough number, and there's parking facility for 0 at the base of this entranceway. If it was a private entity, the first question that would be asked, what is your estimated volume and what is your parking facility for that? We sit very closely to the junction of the road heading down to the outlet road. And in fact, the intersection starts at the base of that driveway. So that's going to create its problems in itself for traffic. And I would suggest a traffic management plan needs to be put in place to find out whether that's actually a viable proposition. Like I say, accountability starts now. It starts with the panel and the process. In closing, I'm a resident of the QLDC. I support most activities that happen. Do it once, do it right. How many times does the QLDC have to learn that they actually don't do it right? And that comes at a cost to the ratepayers, to the people of the QLDC. If this decision over Mount Iron is made wrong or incorrectly made or partially incorrectly made, there'll be a mop-up job yet again for the ratepayers of the QLDC. Magic numbers got quoted not so long ago. $50,000 per household is owed by the members of the QLDC. Let's not make it more. Let's do it once, do it right. If we're going to put walkways in, if we're going to put cycleways in, take responsibility, do it once, do it right. Very important. That's me. Sorry, guys. You're wearing the hat.
I'm sorry, we put our hands up for this. Yeah, any questions, Barry? No, I'm certainly familiar with the area of the steepness and the access, so take points.
The road is non-compliant under its current standing. You put more traffic on that, more pressure on that, someone has to be responsible.
So if we can't legally close this, what's your fallback position? If there is one.
Well, we can't close it, sorry.
Oh, if we can't stop access or through Gate 9 or Mount Iron Heights, whichever, like if there's a legal issue with us not being allowed to close it, because it's
If it comes down to a legal standing, it's a real simple process. Do it once, do it right. Upgrade the road, put the retaining walls in. Probably suggest at that stage you really need to put a budget in place and do the job properly. Don't cut the corners in the infancy. Do the job properly at the start, the planning stage.
So, assuming that we don't have the money to do that immediately, do you have in your opinion, an option of leaving some kind of access way there at all, or you'd rather see none?
I think there's always been the ability of an access way. You're talking now about advertising it as a public access way, right? And that's the difference. The minute you advertise it as a public access way, you're now admitting liability with the fundamentals that lie behind that. Is there an answer for that? Not without a budget and not without significant expenditure. If it was private entity, there'd be significant costs in that involved.
Okay.
And we've got an entranceway, don't forget, not that far away in Hidden Hills. Look at the access way into Hidden Hills and the footpathing, the roading and so forth. Maybe that's what we have to look at on the shared driveway up through Mount Iron Heights.
Thank you.
Maybe.
All right, thank you. Really helpful, Pete. Thanks very much. Ben, is it? Yeah. Thanks, go on, Ben.
All good?
Yeah, over to you, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm Ben Thompson. I'm a Wanaka-based lawyer. I've got 3 young children. I've been an active mountain biker in Wanaka for around 15 years. I'm a member of Bike Wanaka, but these are views of my own. I was very pleased to hear Council's acquisition of the land and supportive of the draft reserve management plan. Given its natural resources and topography, Wanaka is significantly underserved by good quality mountain bike options in comparison to other areas such as Queenstown, Nelson, Rotorua. Mountain biking by definition is anything that is not on a road. So beyond that, it can mean anything from riding on flat gravel paths like the Millennium Track all the way up to a very advanced downhill trail like you might see at Cadrona. Wanaka is already very well served in terms of free and accessible riding options in the bottom half of that scale. The Lakeside and the Outlet Trail, Millennium Track, Newcastle Track, Luggett Track, Harware Track, Deansbank Track, and so on. There is a lack of good quality tracks that cater to a wider range of abilities. Sticky Forest has admirably attempted to fill that void, but obviously its future is now at risk. And even if that was not the case, it is of a limited size and geographical nature, means that in spite of the best efforts of the trail builders, it still doesn't adequately fulfill that need, in my opinion. Bike Glendu, it's a commercial operator. They charge $39 per visit or $32 for a student. It's not possible to visit there unless you don't have access to a car. And it's also composed primarily of machine-built trails with little natural single track. Cadrona, relatively short season, also presents issues in terms of access and cost that particularly impacts young riders. The town has the benefit of some very good jumps and skills parks. It's located right on the town fringe at Lismore Park. My office, very close to that area, and it's very encouraging to see the number of young riders that make use of the facility on a daily basis after school. That's almost year round throughout winter. I've noticed that. However, those offerings are limited only to dirt, jump / flow riding, which is a particular type of mountain biking. Owing to its unique geological characteristics, which the management plan refers to, its glacial history, presents a unique opportunity to develop a network of natural technical trails on Mount Iron that really we can't do anywhere else. And it would fill that void in Wanaka's riding options. Back when informal mountain biking took place on Mount Iron, I used to ride there. And I really did enjoy the type of terrain that was offered because it was really something different and unique to the rest of what we had. And to me, it's a hugely valuable resource if that could be captured. So my submission primarily is that the trails that might be constructed on the reserve make the most of this unique landscape, and that a dumbed down machine trail built approach isn't adopted because not only would that be more damaging for the environment, it would fail to cater to the large majority of users who would likely wish to use the facility. As I've noticed, the district is already very well catered to in terms of cross-country and flow trail options. The lack of more demanding technical trails has been a characteristic of mountain biking in Wanaka for a long time, and this presents a huge opportunity to remedy that. The management plan refers to the risk around illegal mountain bike trails being built. I've grown up as a young person mountain biking. I'm very familiar with that. These type of trails are predominantly, you could probably say 95%, they're built by young riders and young advanced riders. The risk of that happening would be hugely mitigated if you catered to the type of riding they wanted to do by providing a technical advanced type descent option on Mount Iron. They wouldn't have a need to construct trails. In Sticky Forest, there used to be a lot of ad hoc jumps constructed in the Kiramoko area before that got replanted and redeveloped. Big, dangerous jumps that kids were building. Ever since we've developed Kiramoko into more, I'd say intermediate jump options and Lismore Park, you see far less illegal stuff constructed because they're being well catered to. The kids will just go to Lismore Park because that's where they want to go. It's easy. They can cycle there after school and they can hit the jumps there. Generally, the standard of rider in Wanaka is higher than other areas around the country, owing to the demographic of the population that we have and the access to the outdoor activities that we enjoy. And that should also be factored into the track design and nature. Lismore Park, I've commented a few times. When my daughter was just 4 years old, she was able to ride there because it has options all the way from 4-year-old all the way up to a very advanced jump line, which really probably very few people can hit correctly in the town. Large gap jumps almost to a professional grade. But what I've witnessed is many of these youths that have been coming there after school, they're probably only 12 or 13 years old in their school uniforms. Within the space of probably about a year since it's been officially opened, they've already progressed up into using that line. So they're comparably some of the best mountain bikers in the country already just by having that facility there within a year. And I genuinely feel if a similar approach was adopted on Mount Iron with the range of technical abilities, you'd experience that benefit there, which for a town I think is a good thing because we've experienced a huge benefit to having Olympian gold medalists coming from Wanaka in snow sports. And the only reason why that's happened is because Snowpark went under and Cardrona picked up the slack and put investment into a huge terrain park facility, and all the local kids are getting the benefit of that. We can do the same on Mount Iron to an extent. By offering these local riders somewhere where they can go, they can cycle to themselves. They don't have to pay $40 each time they go. They don't have to get mum and dad to drop them off. They can literally ride there from school. They're not going to be causing any issues with parking. And I feel strongly that that's what we should be adopting at Mount Iron, because the nature of that topography really lends itself well to technical natural descents. And to have that right on our doorstep would be a huge asset to the community. The side benefit, which I referred to earlier, is those type of trails have the least scarring impact on the landscape. You wouldn't be using machines and diggers. You'd be putting it in the hands of the mountain bike community to make them by hand, and effectively they're getting scratched into single tracks. And so, yeah, least offensive on the eye, but also in terms of the impact on the landscape. The plan refers to uphill tracks and the potential for shared use trails. That's not something I oppose, because all of these type of access points do need an uphill trail, and it's been common in Sticky Forest, also 7 Mile in Queenstown, for all the uphill trails to be pretty much mixed use on an informal basis, because those are kind of informal riding areas. But I'll see walkers on the uphill tracks at Sticky Forest almost every time I go. No problem with that, because you're only going quite slowly when you're climbing uphill. And I feel that would be beneficial to the whole community to share that resource on the uphill trails so people can enjoy the full reserve to its maximum possible extent. So yeah, I guess you may have gleaned, I'm hugely in favour of the plan and development of mountain bike tracks on the reserve. I just strongly encourage council to consider the type of tracks that go on there to make sure we cater adequately to the local demographic and the youth that we've got. And that will mitigate the risk of illegal track building, make the most of the opportunity.
Thanks very much, Ben. Really good. Just a clarification for me. You talk about making the trail that have sort of technical trails and making by hand, so less offensive. The issues have been raised as these, if we have bike trails and walking trails, how to do the separation practically. You know, if you want to, you know, there's been a push for more walking in areas that they can't walk now, or haven't with walking trails, and then the practicality of having bike trails and walkers trails in the same area, and the danger of crossover and things like that. You got any comment on that?
Yeah, it should definitely be kept separate. And so if you're building descent trails, it shouldn't be walkers shouldn't be allowed on them. But there's multiple examples elsewhere around the country where they operate in quite good harmony. So in more sophisticated bike park settings, they would create some kind of crossing if that was required. So if you wanted to create a walking trail that kind of looped and potentially intersected multiple descents, you would have to construct bridges effectively. And that's not uncommon in other places I've ridden around the country. So the bike will ride up over a bridge and cross over the walking trail, which could continue to loop around. Because the walking trails don't generally like to go straight up and down, they're more winding around. So because you can potentially, say you put in like 4 or 5 descents, you could isolate that to one part of the mountain and just go like that, and you have the one climbing trail and that's it. And that would mean that you wouldn't potentially have walkers in there. If you wanted the walkers to intersect, then you would need some ability for them to cross over, which means more cost. But in the scheme of things, the mountain bike trails aren't hugely expensive to build, especially if you're working with a community of volunteers that are willing to do it. They're almost cost neutral to the council as a community asset. And yeah, the cost of putting in a few bridges and fences here and there, I don't think would be hugely significant.
So you're comfortable that the policy in there about having well-designed trails and tracks would cover the things you're just talking about?
I think so, but the common, yeah, I think they need to be designed by mountain bikers or people that ride and actually have knowledge of these things, because the temptation would be to replicate something that's a more dumbed down experience, which my genuine view, if you did that, you'll get a lot of illegal trails going in there. Because you're just not catering to the type of rider that predominantly we want riding it, which are local people who are riding back and forth on their bikes. And we don't really have that. Glendu is a really good example. They're obviously doing it from a commercial perspective to try and make money. So they've really catered to tourist money, people coming through town, maybe want to ride there once or twice. So 80 or 90% of their trails are not really that interesting to ride from a technical perspective. There's a lot of jumps, so the younger kids like those. So, but we've already commented on the jumps. We've got Lismore here and Kiramoko as well. What Mount Owen can offer is like a more technical descent, which they don't really have much of at Glendu. They've only got 1 or 2 trails like that.
You got any question? Okay. That was very good. Thank you very much, Ben. Okay. Bartholomew here, please. Hello. Welcome, Andrew. Floor yours. Thank you.
I'm Andrew Bartholomew. I'm an ordinary resident of 18 Highfield Ridge, Hidden Hills. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to my submission to the Mount Iron Reserve Management Plan draft version. I sort of understand why QLDC want to make a reserve out of Mount Iron. I sort of understand it. I think it's going to be very difficult. I do understand the stated primary purposes in 1.1, which I can agree with those. What bothers me is some of the objectives that sit below that. There is, however, one objective that I can sign up to completely, and that is 5.6, and I'll just remind everybody here of that. And that is to retain the reserve as an undeveloped slice of the outdoors within a busy town, providing respite from the surrounding urban area. Now, I think we all need a bit of that. I think some of us need a lot of that. And if you keep that objective front and centre to your thinking and your planning for the reserve, I doubt you will go far wrong. It offers space, it offers freedom, it offers exercise, it offers the ability to refresh and think in an unencumbered, relaxed place. The problem is that other objectives clash with that. So there's talk of community events, there's talk of commercial activities, there's talk of private functions, there's a talk of additional increased car parking required from time to time. And if you're up there trying to pursue objective 5.6 and you meet one of these other activities, it's likely to make you feel, think of elitism, which engenders feelings of resentment and can lead to feelings of anger, particularly at a time when you're probably trying to escape just those very feelings. There's already plenty of other places within Wanaka where such activities, community activities and commercial activities can take place. Why you would want to encumber such a unique facility as Mount Iron with those activities is slightly beyond me. I'd just like to talk a little about access, a couple of points. I read on point 6.5.1, which is an access policy, allow for bus specific parking spaces where there is space, admittedly if needed. And there's talk about providing camper van specific parking spaces. These are big vehicles, and I would suggest that if you are going to pursue this option, then a completely new parking area, for example, off Junction Road, could be created as a node to provide all the necessary infrastructure for those vehicles, such as toilets and water and power, etc. I think the thought of a bus turning up with 50 people piling out and heading off up Mount Iron fills me a bit of uncertainty. But at least if that was the case at a remote location like Junction Road, there would be the potential for those people to spread out before they reach the normal access points, both to the south and the east of Mount Iron. As I've already said, I live on Hidden Hills. Hidden Hills, the access there is already very popular. It's a very quiet residential area. It's quite a pretty access route, and it's currently very well used by walkers, dog walkers, cyclists, runners, and it's very well connected both by footpaths and cycleways. There is no formed car parking at the top of Hidden Hills. There's a turning circle. There are 3 unpaved parking spots that have been created by use next to the gas bottles. We have noticed that there's an increased use of the turning circle for cars parking. And there are times now, I've experienced it myself, where I've found 4 cars parked on the turning circle at all points of the compass. And I turned up with a truck and a trailer just to have a look at some work that was being done on the berm. We'd had some spraying done there. I literally could not turn my trailer around. I couldn't reverse it because I had nobody else with me. I couldn't see the back of the trailer. I had to wait there until somebody came off Mount Iron so that I could actually turn off the turning circle. So I have a suggestion, please, that you promote foot and pedal only access through Hidden Hills Drive, and the 3 car parking spots are converted to mobility parking spots, so that you can then begin to address Access Policy 6.52, which says provide paths and recreation infrastructure close to arrival areas that cater to people with limited mobility. So it would seem to be a sensible merging of able-bodied people and people who are disabled for whatever reason. And from that point, you could then create mobility-friendly pathways, at least up to the saddle, and create vistas to the north and the east of the mountains that people with limited mobility could access and enjoy. And it would also allow for maintenance and emergency vehicle access deep into the reserve and close to both Mount Iron and Little Mount Iron. And I would suggest that the access at Hidden Hills should be kept vehicle free for all those reasons. I'd just like to turn now to safety. I walked up Mount Iron yesterday, in fact, from Hidden Hills Drive, to think about and to find space to think about this presentation today. And whilst up there, I decided to speak to a number of people who were on the top of Mount Iron. I spoke to a large family group of 8 who are not from Wanaka. I spoke to a gentleman from California. I spoke to a local lady who was there with 3 out-of-town friends and 1 child. And I spoke to a couple from Germany. I asked them a question. I said, do you perceive or have you, are you aware of any personal risk whilst on Mount Iron? The answer was universally no. You've even got an AED up here. You know, how safe do you want it to be? It's an easy walk. It's stunningly beautiful with its 360-degree view. We have no worries. Question 2. Did you notice any signage relating to your personal safety on the way up? Universally, the answer was no. And then on reflection, the German lady, in fact, said, yes, I think we noticed a notice to say that we were crossing private land. Question 3. If I told you that Mount Iron is recognised as one of New Zealand's highest risk areas for wildfire, how would that make you feel? So I've got 6 responses here, which I think to me are quite illuminating. First of all, a general feeling of disbelief. Secondly, well, it's too green to be a wildfire risk. C, there were no notices to that effect at all. D, one lady who had a child said, I might not have brought my child if I'd known that. The 5th was California and Australia have unmissable notices to that effect. And if what you say is true, why are there no such notices here? And finally, if it's real what you're saying, there should be a relative risk website, like a weather website for each day, so that you can make an informed decision, and this should be advertised on well-placed access notices. So my feeling for a long time, and I've raised this at several former meetings, the current notices about fire are feeble. They're seemingly invisible. And the other thing I gleaned from yesterday is that people are not frightened by the truth. What they want is the truth and information so that they can make informed decisions. And I think that the current signage needs to be replaced. I think it needs to be larger. I think it needs to be highly visible. I think it should declare the wildfire risk that we all know that exists on Mount Iron. And it should have both word and images indicating no naked flames, no smoking, no campfires, no fireworks, no barbecues, so that people who are going onto Mount Iron, and English may not be their first language, understand exactly what their responsibilities are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Most useful. Barry, any questions?
No, good points here. Appreciate your
Have a good evening.
All good, thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was really good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, welcome, Lauren, Becky, and Andrew. Kakano.
Yes, we're here representing Te Kakano. So I'm Becky. Loran's our trust manager. She's not here today, but also Andrew, who's another one of our trustees, is here. This is my son George, who's one of our volunteers, and he's going to decide if he feels like talking or not. It's a little bit scary at these things.
Don't be scared of us.
Right. Good to come along and listen in regardless, and I'll check in and see if he wants to say something. So thanks for having us. So so I'm Becky McCormack, I'm one of the trustees. Speaking on behalf of the board and our wider volunteers, thanks for taking the time to read our submission. I'm not going to go through all of the points. You can see that we're generally supportive of the reserve management plan. Really just want to talk to a couple of key ideas from that, from our written submission, and then also provide you some time if you have any questions as well.
Thank you.
So, as I said, we're generally supportive. We recognise that there's a huge number of submissions and perspectives on the use of Mount Iron. From our perspective, we're really excited about the opportunities to plant, but also to involve a lot of people with the reserve. So for us, I guess we're about balance and relationships. So we're about trying to enhance the natural environment, but alongside including people in that work, which is why we haven't taken a really strong stance either way on recreation. We think that they can be balanced, those activities. And just reiterating that we've got a long history in the community, we've got experts, we've got a lot of volunteers who, when you get to the how to implement the plan stage, which we know this is not about today, but it's good to bear that in mind when you're coming up with the rules. When you get to the how, we can offer a lot of support in that area, and and recognising that there'll be risks to balance, like fire risk, alongside what we planned and how that can work. But there's lots of great solutions from similar ecosystems that we can look to, and just reinforcing, I guess, the benefits of people being involved with volunteer work, but being involved with being in nature. Do you want to talk about that, Emily?
Sure.
Okay.
I believe being brought up in a very nature-based environment, being mum and dad extremely involved, I believe that it's really important for, if we're thinking on doing a lot more planting on Mount Iron, that a lot of these plantings are community-based events, as in it's really important to get the community involved with, like, active with their environment.
Because what happens if you're involved with doing the planting? You're more likely to want to keep looking after that.
You're more likely, if you've planted your tree, if you planted 5 different trees and you know which ones they are, you come up and you think, hey, I planted those. You're a lot more willing. You're going to take the time to come up and water them and look after them and weed around them, and take those steps to make sure that they grow into healthy trees.
So so if young people are involved, obviously they're going to maintain those values and stay connected. If different recreation groups are involved, and we've worked with probably all of the different groups, bikers and rock climbers and walkers and everyone, all of those groups that bring a different set of values and priorities, which we acknowledge you have to figure out how to balance. If all of them are involved directly with that caring work for nature, we feel like that's going to help with the socialising of your plan, and also with everyone having a connection to Mount Iron, which is what we can see, the passion involved with the submissions. Everyone does have a connection, but let's try and work towards a vision of everyone having a really positive connection. So do you have any questions for us?
Yes, I'm sure we do. Just to clarify, we've got some submissions saying before we do too much more planting, you should need to get rid of the pests. We heard from the Wild in Time group before. Have you got any comment on that? Before we rush in and do more planting, we should spend a bit of time trying to get rid of the pests first.
Yeah, I would definitely say, yeah, rushing into anything is not a great idea. So our timeframes for planning planting, because we also have to grow the plants first, would be years, not months. So I think absolutely we would maintain a relationship with all of the groups that have an interest in the ecology of Mount Iron, which is a few different groups, and take the advice of what's the best way to approach an area. For us, the main considerations are animal pest species. So fencing an area is really good if you're going to plant, but also access to water is huge. So although it'd be great to plant lots of the Mount Iron Reserve, there will be only certain areas that will be good for planting to begin with. And we would start with the areas where we think plants are actually going to survive. Because watering plants over summer is a massive amount of work and something that restricts where we can get things to survive. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Very good. Well, I just think it's a really great point with the young people getting involved in planting and gaining that sense of connection and ownership and be able to go back years and years later and say we did that. So I think
because the young people are going to be growing up and they're going to be the ones that continue this. So they're going to be the ones that actually keep maintaining Mount Iron and get the ones below them to continue maintaining them as well.
Excellent.
And you're way fitter and younger than us when you're carrying it.
That's our volunteer base, right? That's our next group of people to look after stuff. Yeah.
I guess a lot of the young people are walkers and bikers too. So
Especially being such a sporting, active community.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So just that nature can provide a place for everyone to connect in a way that works for them, and we acknowledge for some people that's recreation, and for some people that might be more of a conservation approach, but they don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thank you. And you'd like to come forward, please? Thanks. Just going to get your.
Thank you.
Thank you very
I
much.
know who I am and what I do, apart from today's submissions on behalf of Central Otago Lakes, Forest and Bird, but I'm also a landscape architect with extensive experience in resource management issues. And I actually prepared a lot of the information supporting the Mount Iron ONF as well. So anyway, so thank you on behalf of Central Otago Lakes, Forest and Bird for the opportunity to speak to our submission. Our branch is predominantly involved in trapping predators in forests and riverbeds and in native planting and weed control projects to restore our rich native flora, but we also advocate and speak for nature when it needs us. Mount Iron, and I include Little Mountown in that title, is a little local mountain with a huge presence. It is a place held dear to generations of residents and visitors of Wanaka and surrounds. It is a major landscape element defining the place of Wanaka in Albert Town. It is our view that first and foremost, the natural values of the mountain need to be acknowledged, respected, and protected. Mount Iron has several layers of values. It is a geosite of national importance for its extremely well-defined roche-moutaine form, excluding the flatter area of land around its base, but even that has geomorphic value. The meltwater channel, where the highway runs through, moraine hummocks and outwash, all part of the highly legible glacial geomorphology that makes our place. Much of the mountain was identified as a recommended area for protection, or RAP, under the Protected Natural Areas Program in the 1980s, recognised today as meeting the threshold for significant natural area, or SNA, for its ecological values: botanical woodland, grey shrublands, wetland turfs, dryland turfs, and rock communities. Nearly all of the hilly part of it is a land environment of which there is only 10 to 20% left in native vegetation in New Zealand. The basin floor area around its base is the highest threat category, with less than 10% of that land environment left in native cover. There are 4 acutely threatened and nationally vulnerable plant species, they're right at the top of the threatened classification, that we know about in the reserve. I have observed 2 of these species in many places over the mountain, including underfoot in trampled areas and right next to bike tracks, and people are using them, by the way. Because these 2 plants are tiny in stature and only appear in spring, very few people notice them, let alone appreciate them. There are 13 at-risk declining plant species that we know of, some of which are also trampled underfoot or occur next to tracks. A range of birds use the reserve: brown creeper, falcon, tui, bellbird. There are at least 4 lizard species and many native insect species, which are often restricted to particular floral communities. The Wildlands Report of 2017 on the Mount Iron SNA describes the reserve as having significant diversity of habitats for flora and fauna, reasonably high species richness, and a very high rarity value as a dryland roche moutonne habitat. The entire reserve, at around 150 hectares, constitutes a large, compact area conducive to being self-sustaining. The reserve area falls into 3 of the 4 categories for the national priorities for protection of biodiversity on private and council land. 1, protection of land environments with less than 20% of native cover. 2, protection of originally rare ecosystems, such as the inland outwash plain. And 4, protecting the habitat of threatened species. These biophysical values, along with the visual values and cultural values, are collectively recognised by conferring outstanding natural feature status to the whole of Mount Iron. Mount Iron Reserve represents an unprecedented opportunity for the QLDC to give effect to its climate and biodiversity plan, and I noted that wasn't a document listed in the officer's report, and the Otago Biodiversity Strategy, where Indigenous ecosystems are protected and managed so they thrive and people are aware of, understand, and are proud of the biodiversity in their place. It is an opportunity to restore some of the appalling loss of basin floor biodiversity in the Upper Clutha, more than 90% of it's gone, which is goal 1 of your plan. This is a prime chance for the council to spotlight its ambitious biodiversity leadership, outcome 1, and to achieve outcome 6, a flourishing natural environment, through action 1.3, embedding biodiversity considerations in all decision-making processes, and action 1.8F, to develop an interconnected network of reserves to support improved biodiversity that honours the Māori of our district, and through action 6.2, to develop plans such as this one that protect, restore and enhance the biodiversity of council land, specifically including Mount Iron. This is notwithstanding the provisions of the district plan to protect the values of ONFs and SNAs and ensure that inappropriate development is avoided. Given the very high landscape values of Mount Iron, which includes the ecological values and a high level of natural undeveloped character specifically, it is fundamentally important in our view that the reserve management plan gives primacy to protecting these values and providing for their enhancement. We submit that the objectives relating to protecting the natural values and the amenity they confer should have priority, and that other objectives related to types of activities and uses must be consistent with or give effect to these higher order objectives. We also submit that before any development is contemplated, a full ecological survey and assessment is undertaken to fully understand the reserve's ecology. This work would include identifying strategies for restoration and animal pest and weed control. We also submit that there is an unsupported assumption that recreation reserve is the best status for Mount Iron. Under the Reserves Act, Part 17.2b, in a recreation reserve, the natural features of the landscape can only be protected to the extent that it is compatible with the primary purpose of the reserve, which is passive and outdoor recreation, i.e. development of facilities would potentially trump the protection of natural values. Whereas in a scenic reserve, section 19.2, the Act requires the natural values to be protected and preserved for their intrinsic worth, as well as for the enjoyment of the public. And facilities may be provided to the extent that it is compatible with that primary purpose of protecting nature. We submit that scenic reserve is the most appropriate status for Mount Iron. Section 24 of the Reserves Act provides for changing the status of the reserve where there is good reason to do so. We believe that this is the case here. Thank you for listening to our submission. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Okay, thanks, Ben. You got any input?
No, I think yeah, shall I say, I know where you're coming from.
You provide a really comprehensive written submission. We appreciate that. Some of the things you're suggesting in there for you, I think you mentioned there's a lot, some of the more detail you provided on the geomorphic side and all the ecology of that. It's just a matter of in a plan, we think it's too big and people look at it, oh, it's as a working plan, but you talked about appending some of the relevant information. So
Yes.
you're comfortable with that, because you have it too much in the upfront plan, most probably obscures what the plan is trying to
Yeah,
achieve.
we have to remember the plan is there to guide the decision makers, not necessarily satisfy the public.
Oh yeah, no,
So if it's
it's
not there, they're not going to be guided, so it
Yeah.
has to be there, and I think in an appendix is where you put it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah, I've got to see your other comments there, I think. Yeah, you mentioned about, and you've just highlighted again, that you do not want to combine to be inconsistent with the overarching objective. I'm just thinking in the wording there, I'm just trying to check whether some of the wording, whether we have to keep repeating that or whether we can cover it.
Well, I did refer to the Lakes Reserve Management Plan, and it has overarching objectives.
Okay.
For example.
Okay.
So you can have a hierarchy. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's really important.
Yeah, I'm just getting down more into the details of how we're writing it. That's right. That's good.
No, it needs to be nutted through, yes. And it does need to be nutted through.
Yeah. Really appreciate it. Any questions?
No, very thorough submission. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne.
Key points.
There we go. Nick Taylor. Who's the lady you put on the journey? Amanda, there's no Amanda here. I know Meg's there, but okay. Meg. Thanks. Welcome, Meg.
Thanks, Amanda.
No, we're just a wee bit of it. Yeah, there was a lady who moved her up the order, but she's not here, so the floor is yours. Hey?
We are.
A bit early. Okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves. That's right.
So Meg Taylor, and just putting this, my submission in as a private individual. I'm a Wanaka resident and I'm a very keen mountain biker. However, I can see that people are quite divided in Wanaka, talking to them over the extent the mountain bikers should have access to the area. I'm a keen biker, but I believe that certainly for the time being, mountain biking should be limited to a commuter track around the base of Mount Iron. I think it's a small piece of relative wilderness in the centre of this very fast growing town. It's very popular with walkers, and the focus should be on walking, enjoyment of views and nature conservation. I don't think the mix of steep bike trails and walking tracks is a good idea from both a safety and enjoyment perspective. While it's disappointing that sticky forest is likely to be unavailable or greatly diminished long term, I don't think this should encourage council to seek to develop biking trails in inappropriate areas. I'd hope that there is some chance at least of preserving some of sticky forest trails when a developer comes knocking at council door for planning permissions. And possibly council and Bike Wanaka could meanwhile be actively seeking other opportunities for downhill biking, because I certainly think that there's a need for biking opportunities for local youth in Wanaka. But I don't think the place for that is Mount Iron. I congratulate council on the acquisition of Little Mount Iron and the speedy opening up of some simple walking tracks connecting to the existing track network. In many ways, I think press pause as on the development of bike trails. And Mount Iron's not going away. There's always the possibility in the future that you may reconsider the thought of further recreational use of Mount Iron, but I think there's no hurry to do that in the meantime. And there's a lot that needs doing just to improve the walking tracks. It's very muddy at the Hidden Hills entrance. So that, there needs to be track development there and gravel laid over an area where everybody's kind of scurrying around in amongst the bushes to get past the mud. And it needs more seats, more signage. I think attack some of those things first. That's my brief submission.
That's good.
Any questions or?
No, we've heard a lot about this, whether the compatibility, how you could have bikes trails without crossing over walking trails. We've heard people asking for more walking trails, not just a biking thing. So we've heard all that, so we've got to balance that all up. But we did take on board your point about pausing and making sure we have a look at this.
Yeah, and I think you can look at the outlet track, for example, where, you know, I think it's great that continues to be a joint bike and walking track, but there's also been murmurings, haven't there, that it doesn't work and that there's, you know, conflict at certain times of year when it's busy. So that's an example of a track that's not working certainly as a combined.
Yeah. Well, that was been raised up at previous minutes also on where it doesn't work, but also on other areas in New Zealand where it actually does work.
Yeah.
So we'll have to pay a look at some of those other examples. Okay. Just your comment about perhaps tracks at the base. We have some tracks there now. Do you have any thoughts on where else?
I haven't had time to really go into it, but obviously, you know, trying to get links through around the North Lake, you know, further Albert Town side to get through slightly more quickly, because it's a very good track, isn't it, from the Racecourse Road through to town? But just, trying to make that Albert Town link, which will eventually possibly link to Hawea and the Albert Town Bridge, and, you know, just, but I'm not sure how feasible, how easy that's going to be. So
I think, and also the Tracks Trust has got some ideas on that too.
Yeah,
that's good.
They probably thought about it a little more.
We're going to hear about that right now. Okay, thanks very much, mate. Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
Welcome, John. You've got your good submission there, all that. So over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to the upgrade of the Tracks Trust submission. The Trust supports the Reserve Management Plan as notified and believe that it has been well crafted to address the competing demands and desires of the public for management of the enlarged reserve. You will have heard some submissions today that claim that environmental values and some recreational values cannot be reconciled. The Trust believes that the newly enlarged reserve has enough room for many different types of users, including walkers, recreational cyclists, commuter cyclists, mountain bikers, climbers, and other recreational and passive users, while carefully protecting the ecological values of the reserve. The Trust is currently working with Council on another track in a reserve and has prepared an ecological report. The plan provides opportunities for Council to be very specific about what they require for any development before it allows. There's a good balance there. It doesn't give anybody an automatic right to do anything. So I think a lot of thought has gone into that process in the development of the plan. The Trust believes that the plan clearly details and guides how the management of the activities requested can be considered, taking into account the ecological, geological and visual amenity values of the site. The Trust notes that the reserve already contains shared pathways with recreational and commuter transport users, together with well-established walking tracks and a number of historic mountain bike tracks. The Trust believes that these uses can continue into the future with careful guidance that the management plan has prepared can and will provide. The Trust notes that this area will only become more used as a result of the proposed development in the immediate vicinity of the new roundabout and the Mount Iron Junction development, and that this area is becoming a key node of the track network in the basin. In respect to walking tracks, the Trust believes that there is scope to carefully add to the existing walking tracks as detailed in our submission to enhance the connectivities of the tracks within the enlarged reserve. In respect of shared pathways, the Trust notes that the reserve already contains a signed shared pathway between Albert Town and Wanaka, entering through the reserve at the old Racecourse Road and connecting through to the Anderson Road roundabout parallel to the State Highway. The Trust believes it's important also to reinstate the Desire Line, a direct link between the Allenby Park entrance and the State Highway underpass. This link was well used until it was closed due to a previous issue regarding land tenure and ownership. And that link is still shown on many walking and cycling apps, including Google Maps. There are also some opportunities to create some small additional shared pathways following clear desire lines from the Mount Iron subdivision to the existing track network on the edge of the reserve near the subdivision. In respect to the Great Ride route, the Trust is aware that the Great Ride link from Cromwell currently anticipates entering the township from the Cadrona River and around the base of Mount Iron from the new roundabout, using part of the existing shared pathway. Now, there is currently increasing user conflict between walkers and cyclists on a section of the eastern side of the reserve, which Meg was talking about. Cyclists are already diverting off that and use an informal route, which is very muddy. There's a good potential here to combine how the Great Ride enters Wanaka with separating walkers and cyclists in that area. The potential conflict is due to the poor sight lines on that section of track. So there's real potential here to just address both those issues. The key thing about multiple use on the reserve, and we must remember that the reserve size has doubled pretty much with this acquisition. The dock section is indeed a scenic reserve. The new section was brought in as a recreation reserve to provide some of that activity on the enlarged site. The key thing, though, is how we manage any new development. Separation between walkers and cyclists is key to this, and that's all about design, how it's designed within the plan. The plan provides for plenty of opportunity to get that design right. The final point, in respect of access points, the Trust does believe there is merit in subtly signposting for walkers and cyclists only the public access up the driveway just to the east of the Hidden Hill subdivision. This could provide a second access for the reserve and remove some foot and cycle traffic for the Hidden Hill subdivision. But this would be would need to be subtle and absolutely no vehicles. The Trust also believes the Council should look to add a new link into the reserve from the eastern side of the reserve, if possible, somewhere in the region of the northern end of Aubrey Road before you get to the roundabout with Gun Road, should any opportunity arise for a subdivision, because that would create a better link for a lot of our town residents into the reserve. So I'm happy to take any questions from practice perspective.
Okay, just a couple of things. We had a comment on some of the submissions about, I think, a policy about peer reviewing, and they submitted said that we get over peer reviewing. If we get well-designed tracks done by appropriate people, do we need to have track peer review type clause in there? What's your view on that?
It probably wouldn't hurt to do that, and particularly if it's in a sensitive area. Absolutely, I don't see a problem with that. I'm not sure who you would get. Potentially someone like a track designer like Southern Land, or a physical track designer. But that's probably not the peer review that the people talked about were thinking.
Well, it came from Dennis, so he just said, have a clause in there. If they design a track, then there's no need for it to be peer reviewed.
I can see arguments both ways.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit more about ecological reports you get done?
Well, the Trust is looking to do, with DOC, we're currently looking to develop tracks down the Harway, through right to the Harway River and through the Cadrona River Basin. For both of those, we have prepared an ecological report so that we avoid rare and endangered plants where at all possible. So we've also done it on the Harway River and the.
Who does it? Who does it?
We bring in an expert, ecological expert. And Stephen is a person who could do that, but there are other people as well.
Okay.
And we've also prepared a lizard survey for 2 of those tracks.
So one of the submitters talking about, we've got walking tracks and trails in now, but now we've, like I say, it's doubled the size of the reserve. The opportunity for more walking trails or tracks in the newly acquired area. Do you think there's an opportunity for that?
I think there's an opportunity certainly for walking tracks up on the top of the hill. I think around the base, you're talking shared pathways. I wouldn't want to see any shared pathways on the mountain itself. I think they need to be clearly separated for walkers and cyclists.
Thank you. Barry.
Has the Tracks Trust given any thought to an active travel link from the Aubrey Road to North Lake side through the base of Mount Iron to the LME car park area?
Sorry,
From the Aubrey Road side?
yeah, so
around
from the
base.
from Racecourse Road, you mean, where it joins?
Yeah, on the northern side, around the base, Mount Iron, linking that North Lake Aubrey Road.
There is, the trust has looked at a potential option from the northern side of Aubrey Road. Probably, yes, there's one potential. There is a link through from an unformed link through from one of the subdivision roads in Mount Iron subdivision that connects to the land that's in QE2 Trust, which was Father Brian Fenton's land. Now, that was, I think a link was put into the subdivision for a potential link there, but that would depend on the owner of the land, the QE2 Trust, agreeing for the public to access it. That's the only potential link through. You've already got the one at Hidden Hills to the east, and then potentially you've got that one just a wee bit further to the east up the driveway. But between Hidden Hills and Anderson Road, the only potential is that theoretical link through the QE2 covenanted land, but that really would depend on the QE2 and the landowner seeing that as a valuable option.
Yeah, thanks, John. That was very good. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Good question. So we're well ahead of time. Andrew, you won't be here. Oh. Is that, were you waiting to speak?
Yes. I mean, okay.
One up, Ben.
Back here.
Hi, Amanda.
Hello. Thank you for hearing me today. My submission for the Mount Iron Reserve is a place for peace, or a place of peace. I have been struggling with mental health issues, which I've recovered from almost in Wanaka, and I've run up the mountain and meditated on sunset about 1,000 times. There's a spot that has a staircase going up to near the summit, but not the summit, just off to one side. And I believe that this place is sacred, and it is what I feel has been historically used for meditation and consulting with the wider community, with more of a spiritual approach than directly. And it's really important to myself, but I think it's also really important that given the name of Wanaka, meaning a sacred place of learning or renewal of the soul, that there is a recognised place to honour the name's meaning. And in my submission for a place for peace, I would hope that people, visitors and locals alike, travelling up Mount Iron to Waiatakaya, can use this space and that space be held for this purpose. I feel that in what feels like a very conflicting and escalating warfare climate globally, that it's really important that to reach a goal, we have designated space for that, and a place where people are good enough as they are, and things just is, and that's okay. So my submission is to propose that there is a place of peace on Mount Iron, and this section of, it looks like a stairway, be recognised as potentially a sacred space. I've tried to contact Mana Whenua, but I haven't received a response. I'm still waiting to hear back in regards to if this is something that's on their radar, which is likely, but yeah, to my knowledge, this is an incredibly special place. Yeah, I could see the temptation that it would be turned into a mountain bike track.
So just on that, how do you sort of see the sacred space being defined? You mentioned the staircase.
It could be as simple as a couple of plantings. There is the defibrillator up the top of Mount Iron. From a practical standpoint, if there was a medical emergency at the summit, there would need to be a heli evacuation. And so that would require that there is a space kept clear for airlift. And so potentially that could tie in with holding space in the area that has, it's historically got a little Waratah fence around it, and then just off to the right, and is where the staircase is. It would potentially just be a couple of plantings and to kind of leave space for, yeah, whatever purposes.
So this obviously we're about this space that that's so important. Are there many other people wanting this up there with, enjoying this space, using it as meditation?
It's
just
been desecrated in the last month. So the trouble is that I was trying to get a feel with negotiating with Ngāi Tahu or Mana Whenua to seek information about if they have recognised it, because there is a potential it might be tapu, and I don't want to breach any tapu. And then I have kept it quiet because I didn't want it to be desecrated or disrespected prior to its recognition. So there is a potential that because I submitted the proposal, that has made it public knowledge, and that's potentially why somebody decided to carve initials into the side of the rock next to the staircase. So I am seeking that maybe not even a decision be made, but that there's a potential for it to be a very special site, and until further information is gained, if it could be held off from turning into mountain bike tracks, then that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, understood. Chris,
other than I like the idea.
It's I don't know if anyone's been up Mount Iron at sunset, but it's pretty special. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, Chris. I just had to. Yeah. I'm enthusiastic about it. Yeah.
Special place.
Yeah.
Barry?
No, I appreciate it, and I think it's important to have a space to meditate and contemplate and think. So yeah.
Yeah, I think especially with the struggle to get into mental health services, that the health system nationally and for regionally isn't doing great at the moment. Anything that we can do to acknowledge that we can support mental health and we can heal from it, that's a really significant thing, I think, for the future generations to know that this is something we can do, and this is something that we hold space for.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming along and talking to us.
No worries,
Really
thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thanks, Brianna. Yeah. Yeah, we're a bit ahead with Andrew too. He's got here. What works yourself?
Yeah, I mean.
We could break for lunch, but he'll turn up as we walk out the door.
It's always going to happen. I've been messaging John, and he will someone tell us.
That's right. Yeah.
Even though that always. Starting on Friday. So this week is going to be rushing everything in. Oh my God, Initially, I was like, yes.
This if you could. Oh, okay. Yeah. Right. That's still everything until the only if that round is enterprise price, potentially. Right. Okay, yeah. Yes. I'll bring it out. Yeah, of course. Yeah, movements. I mean, you can't do it regularly, obviously. Yeah. And if you link that all the way through.
I do little. Time today, please. If I have to read a little bit off my notes, I'm not a good public speaker and probably will get wildly sidetracked if I don't. So my name is Andrew Tomes. I am the current chair of the Hidden Hills Residents Association. This association represents 34 properties in the Hidden Hills neighbourhood on the northern side of Mount Iron. Our members are very familiar with Mount Iron, the ecology, and the specific risks of the area. Firstly, our association supports the recreational enjoyment of Mount Iron as a reserve. As stated in the draft plan, a slice of the outdoors and respite from the surrounding urban environment, and that's what we like. That said, we oppose the draft plan in its current form. Primarily, it does not adequately address important factors such as the critical risk from wildfire and the safety of visitors and adjacent residents. The residents of the area are acutely aware of the wildfire risk, and the QLDC wildfire assessment report or assessment dated 2022 rate Mount Iron as being level extreme on fire risk scale, 20 out of 25, that being the highest in the district. Again, according to QLDC's own wildfire reserve closure policy, Mount Iron currently hosts 180,000 visitors annually, majority in the summer period. With proposals in the draft plan for increased infrastructure, walks, cycling trails, and parking, it's feasible the number of visitors could as much as double in the foreseeable future. With increased visitors, it goes without saying, comes increased risk of wildfire. According to QLDC's own documentation, the fire could potentially burn with extreme intensity of 50,000 kilowatts and take 20 minutes or less to spread from the bottom of Aubrey Road to the top of Mount Iron. In the event of a wildfire, there is a significant credible threat to life for those on the reserve. Even if an alert, the fire is immediate, which most likely it's not. Further, there is little access to fire services, with the exception of helicopters, which could take some time to mobilize to site. Information on this risk is well researched, widely accessible. In addition to QLDC's own 2022 assessment, FENS and Scion Crown Research have highlighted the risks and made recommendations on mitigation strategies. Yet, with all of this knowledge, there is little reference in the draft management plan to the use of this research on effective implementation of any risk mitigation strategies. Yes, we commend QLDC for previously implementing the antenna spark monitoring system. And yes, the planned closure of the reserve on extreme risk days is a positive factor. But considering the level of risk to life and the planned increase of activities, more of the expert recommendations need to be factored in as critical and inclusive parts of this reserve management plan. Some of the recommendations were, but not limited to, improved warning signage, and I think we've already heard from another gentleman on that today. Establishment of fire breaks, direct exit routes, greenbelt planting, restrictions of events, and clearing of vegetation around high-risk locations such as power lines. The QLDC wildfire documents supported by the reviews of Scion and FENS should be central to all objectives and policies within this draft plan. At a minimum, those in our written submission. Most visitors to the reserve are not aware of the potential dangers, and the current signage does not do enough to communicate the risks. Again, I think we've heard to that today. Wildfire risk mitigation strategies should be embedded within this reserve management plan before it is finalised. On some less life-critical subjects, Hidden Hills residents would also request further consideration and more clarity in the draft management plan as per our submission on the following items. Firstly, on pest control. There is a considerable rabbit control problem within the reserve damaging the ecology. While pest control is a single bullet point in the draft plan, realistic control and reduction of the rabbits require extensive work, including perimeter rabbit-proof fencing, rabbit-proofing entrance and exit ways, and a regular commitment of ongoing population control to RSC regional pest management plan standards. The simple trap line referred to in the plan for pest control does not target rabbits. We would ask QLDC to clearly acknowledge the obligations and related plans toward pest control as part of the reserve management plan. In regard to development of new walking tracks and trails, we believe these should be limited in clear boundaries to distinct areas. Mixed use of biking and walking trails, in our opinion, should be explicitly avoided. Safety and fire risk, as highlighted, should be paramount concern in both the design and construction. Again, expert recommendations for risk mitigation, such as quick exit paths, should be implemented. In regard to commercial activities, it's our belief that the permissions for the commercial activities in this draft plan include very little in the way of restrictions. The reality is that the commercial activities appear to contradict some of the stated goals in the draft plan, i.e. public access and enjoyment of the reserve. By their nature, commercial activities will preclude free public access to areas of the reserves at times and introduce urban elements into the draft management, the draft management plan claims to provide respite from. All activities to be aligned with the stated purpose of the draft plan, and commercial activities, if allowed at all, should not impact or detract from the reserve's natural beauty or ecology. If commercial activities were allowed and overflow parking was permitted, then this should be clearly defined as limited to the base of the reserve on the southern side. In regard to commercial activities and fire risk, it would appear to the layperson that mention activities such as weddings or events, especially where hot food is prepared and alcohol is served, pose a greater risk to wildfire, and these should not be permitted, or if permitted, strictly limited in location and scale to the areas of low fire risk and only when able to be conducted safely, if at all. And then lastly, on parking and access. Primary and secondary parking locations are mentioned in the draft management plan, but should be specifically limited to the southern sides of the reserve where there are ample areas for extending and developing parking facilities. Other entrances, such as those in the Hidden Hills Drive, should be encouraged for use only by pedestrians and cyclists, providing access to communities from, say, North Lake, Ukawai, and the surrounding areas. The Hidden Hills Drive specifically has no formal parking area and already is busy enough that residents have occasionally been blocked from accessing their own properties. There's already been damage to plantings and properties from ad hoc parking due to lack of space in that area. Therefore, vehicle parking should be discouraged at this location, and we request the same should be specified within the draft plan, or that plan, should I say. In conclusion, the residents of Hidden Hills support the use of Mount Iron for the enjoyment of recreational users, but under the provision that can be done safely with consideration for the well-being of the reserve users and the adjacent residents. Our written submission provides specific points to this regard. In the draft management plan, there is already an entry, policy 6.8.3, which states, identify risk when QLDC becomes aware of them, to mitigate them, and to communicate them. I believe it's clear that the risk of wildfire has already been identified. We have expert recommendations on their mitigation. So, if we can please start by making good on this policy by including and prioritizing these known risks and mitigation strategies in the final reserve management plan. Thank you.
Very good, thank you very much. Any questions?
No, I don't think so, actually. I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from with regards to the fire risk and that sort of thing.
I mean, the fire risk is effectively, obviously, primarily for visitors, but it also does affect residents in the area as well.
Definitely does. Yeah, no, that's very good. There's some common themes coming through, so that's much appreciated. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
And all the best with your group.
Yeah. All right. Well, enjoy your lunch. Sorry to keep you waiting.
No, that's all right. We're on time. On time. Yeah. Okay, we're going to just take a break for lunch and start back at 1:35. I was all back. What's that? I was on back. No, you gave us. I got to shoot over. Okay. Thank you. Eh? Yeah, really the dog out. No, he's all right. That's right. I'm going from there now for 5 minutes. Oh, okay. I'll shoot up there. Yeah. We'll get that early if we can. We'll keep some lunch for you. Yeah.
How many people on this still speak? Just you and the days.
That's got the boy from AT for putting in a new switch on the wall. Yeah. $250.
Well, we'll get underway again. Welcome, Ewan.
Am I here?
Yeah, come and sit up there. Make yourself comfortable.
Beautiful.
We've got your submission.
Yes. So I just elaborate on
in front of us. You just want to highlight what you think we should be doing.
Okay. Well, kia ora koutou, ko Maki tōku ingoa. Thanks for the opportunity to come and speak to my submission, and thanks for the process. I fully support the proposed Mount Iron Reserve Management Plan, and I very much support the proposed reinvigoration of a small bike trail network within the reserve. My personal support of both the plan in its entirety and the specific reinvigoration of biking is mirrored through the public submissions, and it's great to note that the vast majority of these submissions are in support of the reserve management plan in general. I'm a keen biker, keen walker, climber, and environmentalist. I'm a member of several recreational groups, including being the president of Bike Wanaka. We had a submission earlier on behalf of the club, so I'm submitting today on a personal basis. And I'm a member of several environmental groups. I'd like to first of all commend the process that has taken place to bring us to this point in terms of the creation of the Reserve Management Plan. I feel the QLDC team have communicated excellently throughout, and the many opportunities for community involvement, whether it be through the submissions process, the workshops and the site visits, have been of the highest order. As a result, I feel that the Reserve Management Plan for Mount Iron can really be seen to be fully representative of the views of the community. It's been a fabulous democratic process. And we've got a really good outcome, which is well thought out and well considered. It puts Mount Iron, the outcome of the Reserve Management Plan is very much with community at its heart, which I think is fantastic. Mount Iron itself, in the physical sense, it's iconic, and the creation of a recreation reserve will be of enormous benefit to both people and place. And it's the coming together of those two things, which I'd like to really emphasize: people and place, te tangata and te taiao. Human recreation and conservation of the environment. Too often these things are presented as being in conflict, that one can only happen successfully at the detriment of the other. I'd really like to emphasize in my submission that I don't see that as being the case. The very essence of outdoor recreation is to enjoy being in nature, and at the heart of that enjoyment is not only a desire to conserve, but also to enhance the ecosystems in which we recreate. And that's, to me, the key point here. Noting the proposed bike trails as an example, which have been proposed within the reserve, bike trails need not be catastrophically ecologically damaging. The trails that have been proposed would be sympathetic to the biodiversity of the recreation reserve and the inherent ecological value. The proposal is not for a bike park per se, as we would understand with other places, full of machine-built trails, big berms, jumps, massive landscaping. No, that's not the idea. No alteration of the landscape to that level. Rather, the trails would be low impact, hand-built, visually sympathetic to the landscape. And fundamentally, they're mostly already there anyway. So you're really talking about chucking up a couple of signposts, making sure the safety is correct, making sure there's ample opportunity for walking trails and the like elsewhere alongside, and crack on really for the enjoyment of everybody. And the biking community has an overwhelming desire to see an increase in the ecological health of the reserve, coming back to that point. Bikers like myself, we are trappers, we're avid planters, we're champions of endemic native species, and in general, we are active restorers of nature. I count myself very much as that. I don't want to recreate in a degraded landscape. My enjoyment will be much greater with the restoration and reinvigoration of natural processes on Mount Iron. And I'm really excited that that will be an outcome that's held within this reserve management plan. I very much look forward to a reserve with both recreation and the environment at its core. I think from reading the desires of all parties in the submissions, and there were some great submissions put in, there's no reason why we can't deliver a reserve that meets the needs and wants of the whole community. Everyone should really get a good outcome from this. And I think the process has been managed in such a way that that's the outcome that will be achieved. I hope that we can all work together to deliver this best outcome in a collaborative sense. I'm confident that with QLDC continuing to lead this process, that will be the outcome we get. The Mount Iron Reserve should be an opportunity to bring everyone together, the very essence of community. Thanks very much for the opportunity to submit today. Really excited for the creation of an incredible community space. A reserve management plan has been shown to be overwhelmingly supported by that community. So thank you. And if you have questions or...
No, I just thought, can we record and put onto social media what he said about how fabulous we are?
Yeah, but it really has. Like, I think I've not been involved in a process that has had such a level of community engagement. This is a once in a generation opportunity to get this recreation reserve right. And I think, no effort has been left behind or left undone to see that happen. And I think, we can be really proud of what the outcome is as a result of a good process.
No, very good.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, you. Right. Doug? Doug Patterson.
Yeah, Doug Patterson presenting on behalf of the Southern Hang Gliding Paragliding Club. I probably brought more stuff than I needed to bring, but I thought better to bring too much than not enough. And basically what I really wanted to talk about was just the fact that, as most of you know, or some know, there's a little bit of history behind paragliding at Mount Iron. And it's been in place for about 30 years. When Richard Euclid used to have a school running on the side of the hill and all the houses were built there. But there's a little handout there if someone need to keep things like this in regard to what was discussed or talked about.
Thank you. Yep.
And also there's a couple of little proposals of some signage that you'd like to put up on the hill, which would basically manage safety and just make people aware. One more, it would help to sort of make the place a little bit more safer, and of course just make sure that people are aware of what's going on there and what we need to do to manage the safety. So that's a similar site, which is a similar sign, a full-size sign that would be roughly that size. And we've got two of these up at the moment at TC, one at the landing area down the bottom and one up on the launch. And that just ensures that basically the pilots that turn up that aren't familiar with the area, there's some information there to communicate safety concerns and how we interact with the public and so on. And anyway, since Richard's School was originally founded there, operated till all the housing basically encroached and give up instructing. It's since become a popular soaring site when the winds are suitable, and other than about a 2-year break when the previous landowner asked us to refrain more development still in progress prior to sale, it's been used pretty much consistently for paragliding quite continuously for, as I said, almost 30 years. Site's very susceptible to wind conditions, so we can only fly there on days when the conditions are quite nice, calm, light winds, and lifts right and from the right direction. Best flight, interesting thing to date from the site, is in excess of 50 kilometres from launch to Marama one afternoon, and the pilot was dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, sand shoes, basic safety equipment also, as he was not expected to fly so far. The conditions were excellent and not too cold, so off he went. So it's some fairly substantial flights can be achieved from Mount Isa, which is something that people don't really realise. I mean, generally it's just soaring, people go backwards and forwards, out to the landing area, and maybe thermal, if it's a good enough thermal. Community discussion, safety management is one of our main concerns. We've proposed a safety management system, and this is part of that system. There'll also be a person that will represent the site, other people like myself, who I basically do landowner liaison and talking with people like TC management or Cardrona management in regard to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're not sort of upsetting anybody, and working together to make sure that we maintain safety. And of course, talking through the community education, local and throughout the broader paragliding community, and that's also engaging and capturing visiting pilots that might be coming from international through travel. District capture visiting pilots not familiar with it, sorry. Similar signage has been introduced at Treble Cone, as I mentioned, Coronet and the terraces above the Crown Range, which is a very sensitive location, being close to controlled airspace. On the Queenstown approach, the sign would be similar to the one you see here, and the draft sign, which is the one that I've just handed out, will be similar to the one you see. And basically that is just, I guess, really we just need to know that we're going to go ahead, we're going to maintain that site and continue to use it, and some approval from yourselves in regard to where we put that up to manage safety. As I also mentioned, the site safety officer will present the club, the flying community, and will contact or should any issues or concerns arise. We hope to be able to continue with a good relationship as we developed over the last 30 years. So that's pretty much it from me. I don't really have any questions. I know it's a little bit different. A lot of people sort of look at it, sort of wonder why people want to do it.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, obviously you paragliders walk up the track to get to the launch site, and that's one of the blue, the little dot blue.
That's just.
Have you had any issues with any sort of not high level conflict with the walkers or anything up there? Or?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, that's the sort of thing that we'll also have on that sign. I think I mentioned something there in regard to, you know, ensuring that we don't do low level passes over walkers and, you know, upsetting other people, cyclists coming down the hill.
So is that your current landing spot? Would you have any other landing site?
Allenby Park is the main landing area.
Oh, okay.
That yellow area is people, if they use it like for, it's another, as I said, it's always been used as a training ground, and there's another form of flying that's called speed flying, and they just launch off that and land at the bottom of the hill. Mm-hmm. And it's really just a learning site for launch and takeoff in that situation. Mostly you'll see it'll just be general paragliding, which is just short soaring, relatively slow compared to speed flying. Yeah, and so, but it's, as I said, two nominated landing areas there.
Okay, then when you talk about training and that, is it a commercial activity or?
No. No, the commercial activity is completely finished there now.
Is there any implications with the CAA review of the airspace?
There's always going to be implications with CAA when they review things. Currently, at the moment, it's in general, it's G-class airspace.
Yes.
And basically anyone can use it. We try and maintain a presence and also communication with the airport user groups in regard to what we're doing around the place. They're aware that it's a site, and assuming that we're locked into the site and we're going to put signage up here, we'll also present that to the airport users group as well, because it's kind of on the approach to in and out of Wanaka Airport.
Yeah. So over the years, good safety record?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like any physical sport, and I mean, you know, you don't see it as physical when people are just cruising around, but launching and landing, it's physical. You know, you're moving all over, sprains and strains, and occasionally maybe someone gets tangled up in something and injure themselves. But no, look, I'm only aware of, and I've been in Wanaka, I guess now for about 10 years, of two incidents, if you like. One where a guy crashed at the bottom and basically walked away. But no, you know, major injuries. I think probably the mountain biking is more dangerous. Yeah. So you're going fast and you're close to the ground all the time. So.
Yeah. No, it's all good. It's actually nice to see the guys soaring there again and making use of that area.
Yeah, well, people did actually ask why did we ever stop, and we said, well, basically the owner asked us not to for a couple of years there while the sale or whatever was being developed, so we just didn't go there for a while.
So there's no pressure on Allenby Park for landing. No, there's no issue there with other park users. You're not looking for any other sites, or
No, like unless it's a nice thermic day and you get up and climb out, you can come back and land at Pembroke Park. You can go anywhere. As I said, on the record for the site is 50 k's, which is roughly Marriman. You can go and land almost anywhere as long as it's okay to land.
Have you struck any issue with drones? People using drones in that area?
Drones are always potentially an issue. I mean, drones and paragliders don't really match, but I'm not aware of any of that. I think
we have got something in the plan about not having drones on
that would be suitable for us. But I mean, it's like we work with helicopters all the time. Yeah. So again, it's an awareness thing. I mean, signage is a pretty soft form of communication, but at least you're making people aware that it is a paragliding site. And I mean, that's something that we may need to include in that awareness of people flying drones. But if it's going to be a case that it's one of these areas that you don't want drones, and that's all about it.
Good.
Although a couple of friends who are paraglider and one who's a spring flyer, so and I look out of my house at Mount all day, every day. See lots going.
Yeah, as mentioned, it's going to be a pretty good facility, a really good community facility for people to use doing different things. And I mean, this is one that's been going on for a long time. So we just want to make sure that we maintain the relationship and ensure that we're doing whatever we need to do to manage it safely.
It's come up from other groups too. Every time we want to do something on we're going forward, then make sure we do have a good consultation, because if we decide to put more tracks in down the bottom there, that obviously impacts you. So there'll be consultation with all groups before too much is done. That's good. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Oh no, sorry. That's all right. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, next.
Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to adjourn the hearing or meeting today, and we're going to form again here tomorrow morning at 9:00. We'll do some deliberation. After that, then we'll close the hearing and work on a decision on the outcomes. Happy with that? Thank you. So, meeting adjourned.